Here is Anne's copy to read. Save one for me and then I saved one for you and I knew it was yours because I accidentally. So I'll go down there. Thanks. Yep. Thank you. You're welcome.
Things very disrespectful.
He said, "No, you shall not pass."
And you rebooted.
I restarted.
You started. Because I just logged in down here and.
Is there a drop down next screen? Is there a drop down there that gets me over?
Worker GA, gotcha. I mean, that's. As soon as you hit that, it should ask you to log in. It's
Right.
not asking you to log in.
It's
But
usually my
Is
ad-
you logged in? Is anybody, you are logged in? So Roger, my goodness, it's you. What happened?
I prepared for the meeting and I had it open for a long time.
Oh, that's what it was.
Reading all that
You got tired.
garbage. Yeah,
You got tired.
doesn't want to go through that again.
No internet access?
Okay, let's try to fix that.
I will.
Start there. Weird. I didn't want to.
You know what?
I actually, you're right.
But get it fixed for next
It's
time.
the same screens that will show up here.
There we go.
Oh, there you go.
It wanted internet.
Now I gotta work.
I gotta work. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call to order our work session of February 23rd, 2026. Bonnie, roll call. Everybody's here. Yay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Pledge of Allegiance is going to be led by James Sismanakis of Discover DeKalb. James is the executive director, and that is our Convention and Visitors Bureau, if you didn't know. And he and his staff work year-round to market and promote our city and events and drive tourism, including the annual Tucker Restaurant Week, which is launching when? Tomorrow. I know, I was on TV today, but it launches tomorrow. You ready for us? The flag, United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, James. All right, next we're going to move on to D, public comment. Rules of decorum come from Robert's Rules of Order. Our meetings are held in accordance with Georgia's Open Meetings Act. We will call up those that signed up to speak and then open up to those in the room. If you have signed up by mistake, just feel free to say pass when your name is called. You will each have 2 minutes to speak, but keep in mind that neither council nor I can respond to you during this time, but we can follow up with you later on if there are questions. Nobody signed up. Did anybody change their minds? All right. No public comment. Thank you. We're going to move on to mayor's opening remarks. So we have a proclamation tonight. This is my first proclamation here for a city council meeting. Tomorrow starts the 6th annual Tucker Restaurant Week, hosted by our partners in our CVB, Discover DeKalb. To commemorate, we are presenting a proclamation to James Sismanakis of Discover DeKalb. So James, I'm going to have you come back up. We should have just had you do it. Stay up here with us. I should do karaoke. Nope, nope. Okay, there we go. Here we go. All right, you ready? In honor of the 6th annual Tucker Restaurant Week, whereas Tucker is a celebrated destination for diverse and unique restaurants that contribute to the quality of life and economic development portfolio in this community. And whereas restaurateurs continue to choose Tucker to open their businesses, adding to the regional interest of our city as a destination for food. And whereas the food service industry is part of the backbone of our business community, creating jobs for hundreds of people across Tucker. And whereas it has been established that restaurants are one of the biggest factors in a successful approach to local tourism. And whereas Discover DeKalb, the Convention and Visitors Bureau of the City of Tucker, has partnered with the city for the 6th annual Tucker Restaurant Week to help celebrate our great restaurants. And now, therefore, let it be proclaimed by the mayor and city council of the city of Tucker that February 24th through March 1st, 2026 will be the 6th annual Tucker Restaurant Week and encourage all citizens to support local eateries in Tucker. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Tucker to be affixed this 23rd day of February, 2026. James, thanks for being our partner.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get you guys to come on up. All right, so get your stretchy pants ready for this week because I expect to see you at lots of different restaurants for every meal. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and dessert is available. All right, we've got two other fun events coming up in March. We have the Rubber Ducky Hunt on March 7th from 2 to 4 p.m. at Kelly Cofer Park. And then the 14th of March is the Pie Day, Pi K, starting at 3:14. Oh, y'all are so clever. At Tucker Rec Center. And I think that's a Saturday, so everybody can do that. And I'll just give you my secret is I just show up and wave everybody off and hang out and eat a piece of pie and then greet you all when you come back. Yay! As a reminder, we typically reserve our second meeting of the month as a work session where we hear presentations. So it is not a meeting for public hearings. So let's go ahead and get started. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
A motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right. Any questions on that? All right, very good. All those who approve, show of hands. All right. Thank you, Bonnie. That's 7. All right, we got G, first presentation, our Discover DeKalb annual tourism update. Erica, are you going to do an introduction or? All right.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, before you, you'll get an update from our Convention and Visitors Bureau of DeKalb County on marketing activities, tourism activities for the city of Tucker. They are our provider of such. And presenting will be Mr. James Sismanakis, who's the Executive Director. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Well, I guess it's good evening, everyone. Glad to be here. Appreciate you inviting me. It's always fun to present. The first thing, since it's been a year, seems like it's been longer than a year, but it's been a little while. So it's going to just kind of update you because I know there's a lot of new faces on what is Discover DeKalb and Discover Tucker. So as it's been said, we are the official tourism organization for Tucker. We have a staff that is dedicated to selling, promoting, marketing Tucker. We have members who are individually handling websites, blog posts, social media, the tourism podcasts, and the first podcast mobile in the United States for a destination CVB. So we have a salesperson, a family reunion person. So they're all working to sell and promote the destination of Tucker. We are thank you. So we are basically how we are funded is the Tucker has an 8% tax, and we receive restricted money for tourism marketing and sales, which is 3.5% of your 8% that you collect from your hotels and your VRBOs, Airbnbs. Anyone that is in that particular system collects and pays the taxes. So with that, we are responsible for marketing the destination, having the website. We also have discovertucker.com that goes directly to a Tucker page. We promote the events going on. We promote the ability to have sporting events either in the facilities or using the hotels. We work now. We're part of an Arts DeKalb that is being created through the county. And then Erica has been serving on a new entity that I inherited for FIFA called DeKalb United, which is set up to be able to market activities, events, watch parties, and things like that that are here for the 2 months or really a month in between the 2 dates of FIFA World Cup. So, and Erica, as said, has been part of that organization, attending meetings, working closely. We have Sports DeKalb, which Rip, unfortunately, he's retiring, but Rip has been a board member of my Sports DeKalb organization, really pretty much since he became Parks and Rec person. So that's what we do. That's what we're mandated to do. So I'm going to get into a little more of the nuts and bolts of what we do. Kind of the boring stuff. It shows the occupancy. So we have a Smith Travel Research that gives us every month reports on occupancy, the average daily rate, the revenue per occupied room, which is like money in the bank is what we consider it. And we track how Tucker, DeKalb, Chamblee, Stonecrest all does with their hotels. In Placer AI, that's one of our probably our favorite pieces. We utilize this for all of our cities for their special events. This is a summary of what we've got for people coming in. So of course, Atlanta is the top feeder, which you figure, that's amazed me for 15 years I've been here, that Atlanta is the top feeder and the top room night generator. But I guess if you look at how big Atlanta is, many times you're on the other side of Atlanta, so you come here and stay, or you come here and do things. So in Macon, Georgia, New York, Greenville, Spartanburg, Tampa. So as far as the scheme of things, the biggest numbers coming to the destination overall is from Tampa, Orlando, Tampa, St. Petersburg. Next is Miami, Orlando. Then South Carolina is our second biggest feeder. Because if you look at New York, it's really hard for us to do anything to bring the New York people here. They're coming because they're coming. So it's not really a market that we can spend money to try to get you to come extra. But then we look at hotels, 157,000 different trips, with the restaurants 81,000, retail 78,000. But what we're really wanting to get into is like one of the events that we can do with Placer AI is Tucker Day. And Tucker Day shows we had 3.8 thousand people who attended. They stayed about 73 minutes. They had we already said 3.8 visitors. What I think this is interesting is it tracks where you came from to Tucker Day and where you went from Tucker Day to where you went. So most people, of course, came from their homes, but people came from Village Burger. Of course, it's right downtown, Kofor Brothers. Then they went back to Village Burger, Racetrack, Trio Nails. That one was kind of interesting. And this is tracking the population of the people coming, how long they stayed, when they came. So it gives you a lot of interesting information. And what we do now is we're going to be sending reports to the city and city council on the different events with graphs and charts. But I was talking to my research person. She's in Cleveland right now at a function. And I had her pull the 3rd of July event for last year. So from the 4 p.m. to 11:59, everyone staying over 10 minutes. Our numbers show from La Vista to Lawrenceville on Main Street. You all had about 6.2 thousand people for that event. So I thought that was pretty amazing and pretty good for an event that's one day and one that's held all over the country. So, as I said, we do sports. So these are Tucker numbers. So Triumph, which is the Tucker Youth Soccer Association, their main event is the Triumph Cup. They use your Henderson Park as well as a couple other fields. We had a rugby tournament here. We have room nights for 285 lacrosse that stay here. You have the professional Frisbee team called the Hustle, and the Growlers and the Colorado Flyers are teams that came in who played the Hustle, and they play at Silverbacks Park, but bringing in 1,527 rooms to $196,983 of room nights. So that was pretty impressive. The next thing I want to brag a little bit about RIP again. So we had an opportunity through Dan Corso, who is the Atlanta Sports Commission director. So I've been talking to him and doing with FIFA, but we never had an opportunity to show any locations in DeKalb. So with talking to him, can everybody hear me as I move around? Unfortunately, Greek, I have to move. So Rip came out on a Tuesday morning and we showed a person from Ireland and Oregon, Washington, the main big facility at Henderson Park, the full-size facility right by the tennis center. And we walked and showed them where they could put trucks and locker room type trailers, and then they could use several other fields. They'd have to go around to the other side, but they could use several fields over there for their scrimmage games. So it's not until 31, so we have time. But I was impressed by the fact that we finally got into the game, no pun intended, I guess, to be able to showcase DeKalb. We had to showcase Tucker for World Cup, for rugby. So also that partnership with Dan's first time, so we're hoping to have a lot more opportunities, because when, FIFA's coming, it's already too late really to do a whole lot as far as with teams or with fields and all. So next up, we have a grant program that we administer to nonprofit organizations. So because the Triumph Cup is such a big event, we sponsor Tucker Youth Soccer Association to bring teams here. We also sponsor Tucker Days. We've been doing that for as long as I can remember being here, 15 years. And we sponsor Taste of Tucker. But in addition to that, I think that's the next one. Let me go back. In addition to that, we sponsor different city activities with the Sound of Summer. And since we're not able to pay the city in a grant form, we pay for different activities with the summer concert series, with T-shirts and flyers and things like that we contribute by actually paying the bills for these type of events. So we have a social media person who handles our different Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, X, and all the different media like Threads that we do on a regular basis. So we cover the gamut on social media. So you can just see some of the different ones that we have out. Grecian Euro from today with the mayor. Did you try his food? I wanted to try it.
What?
Did you try the food from today?
I
Weren't
had
you?
it for dinner tonight, but no,
Okay.
because their hands are all, they're setting it up to look beautiful.
Yeah, so you
And they
couldn't
told me
eat.
I couldn't eat the potatoes.
Oh,
I wanted to.
that's
Like, you
sad.
don't want to eat those right now.
That was-
Like, you want to come to the restaurant and get fresh ones.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, because I was getting hungry just watching. So, and then we also have Access Atlanta that we handle through for Tucker to do different influencers and all that come out and do things in the city. And then also the Tucker Dining Guide that was produced last year. I heard everybody likes that. But also, Sonia and I were talking last week or so that we're going to do the Tucker magazine this year. So it's been a few years for the Tucker magazine. So it's on the agenda this year to produce the Tucker magazine, since last year we produced the Tucker Dining Guide. Also, of course, last year's Restaurant Week, we were always involved and have fun with Restaurant Week last year. We're involved with Restaurant Week this year. Last year and this year, we have a full page ad in Atlanta Magazine promoting Restaurant Week. We also, here's why I was talking about Summer of Fun, some of the different things we do with Summer of Fun. Before I totally forget it, we've started a billboard program under Discover DeKalb, not under Discover Tucker. So we have billboards throughout from the airport coming up, 85, 285, 20, and around from the airport, covering where they move around. So we have permanent boards and moving boards. So Tucker Restaurant will be up on our boards for tomorrow. So that's something that we really cover from the destination point of view versus individual cities. We have a full-time person who does blog posts every day. So these are just the Tucker blog posts. We have an interactive map where you can look at different attractions or restaurants or things to do in DeKalb. And something was interesting. We have the DeKalb gift shop, but then again, Sonia and I were talking, and we want to look into TKR gifts. So get specialized gifts for Tucker. And then we even talked about the concept of looking at the rec center on La Vista, being able to sell TKR gifts and even some of our items and have a partnership there. So we're in discussion about that going forward. And then my salesperson, who's on the left of the picture, if you see Mayor Mock, he's our chairman of the board from the hotel side. And Mike is part of Out Georgia. And we received an award, but then also with the state of Georgia under Convention and Visitor Bureaus, we received a Trailblazer Award for our LGBT programs. So we're very proud to be one of the first bureaus really jumping into marketing and having special promotions for the LGBT. And then we are right now finalizing our FIFA-related digital information in German, which has been a disaster. They're fixing it right now. Portuguese, which has been good. Finding out about Spanish tomorrow, and of course English. So we're going to be having those where you can get them on our website, or you can have a QR code when we're at events. But one of the other things we're doing is we have 4 German football clubs, soccer for us, coming in for a 2-week-long exhibition where they're going to talk about soccer and some of the bad times leading in how they were recovering from basically Nazi Germany type activities with football. So they're going to be here for 2 weeks, the 5 clubs, possibly some other European clubs coming. In addition to that, we have 50 documentaries, short and long films that we're going to be doing 2 days, possibly another 3rd or 4th day of the only place in North America is going to be Montreal, DeKalb, and Mexico City. A little concerned about Mexico City after today, but Mexico City, so we're going to have these independent films, and we're also doing programs in Spanish and Portuguese on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, with actually a bot answering your questions on WhatsApp in Spanish or Portuguese with dedicated landing pages. So we started that during last year's Club Cup, but looking at doing it again with this international film series that we're doing. And then also able to run it in Spain and Portugal, and then have these programs that we did in German going to the 5 football clubs where they can send it out to their fan base that they have. And am I taking too long? We have the DeKalb Talks Tourism. So see there, the owner, chef of Local 7 and the barbecue place. We have Tony from North Lake Mall, who had the comic sci-fi convention. So he's been on the show. We have, as I mentioned, the mobile podcast van, first one in America. We've taken it down to Florida, over to Mississippi Delta, down to Savannah. And of course, you got to interview stuff at Buc-ee's. So, and then one thing you don't see is we have a little bear that's now our mascot called Romy. And Romy's going to take you on tours all over DeKalb. And I'm going to have him animated. He's got his own Instagram page now. So that's kind of a long but quick overview.
Well, stay up there, James. 'Cause
Okay.
There's going to be some questions.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it up to him, but the only thing I wanted to say was that Tucker Day data, when you're getting data for some of those events that the city doesn't do,
Mm.
can you make sure that you're getting that to us so we can pass it on to the committee, or you can
Yes.
pass it on? Because I don't know, some people don't know that the city doesn't put a lot of these festivals on its community groups. So we want to make sure that we're sharing that data with them so that they can look at their event and always, look for continuous improvement.
Yes, we definitely will.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right. Any questions down here? Councilman?
Thank you for this presentation. I actually talked to a few of our local restaurateurs. They just kind of want to extend their thanks. They mentioned to me that the social media influencer campaigns that you guys did was one of the most impactful things in terms of ads and revenue, and in terms of ROI for them. They said it outpaced, stuff like Tucker Day and Restaurant Week. So my question for you is, how can we kind of get more of those sorts of campaigns? And is there a process on how you guys decide, which restaurants or businesses are the candidates?
As far as how to get more of those, we actually have another campaign we're running throughout the year with influencers. So we have influencer campaign for Restaurant Week, but then in some of those slides, there's other campaigns we're running throughout the year to actually have a continuous kind of campaign for Tucker. How we decide on it, actually, I can't answer that, because I think a lot of times the influencers, we give them the list and they make the decisions because you're wanting their own personal stories, but you gear them to where we want them to go, but then they kind of make their own decisions. And how we get to influencers, we actually have a company that we work through that gets us big numbers of people. But then again, we also try to look at some of the big influencers that are more local based, because you have good numbers from different people. I think there's like a cab driver or something, a Uber driver last 2 years ago that had some big numbers. So that's what we do.
Okay. Is there, you mentioned the list, is there any way we can kind of like review the list or look over or have our team contribute to the list? One of the things that I typically notice is it's usually bigger, more established restaurants that we have that gets highlighted. Just want to make sure that we're, also supporting the ones that are more tucked away that don't get as much. So if it's something that's this impactful, I think it'd be pretty helpful to start guiding some of these influencers that direction.
Yeah, I mean, we can work.
I think that's staff's job to work with him on that, but that's a great suggestion.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. So the visitor activity by category, I noticed that section that we were down in almost every category, at least a little bit, except for recreation and entertainment. We were up a little bit. And I wanted to find out like what you thought that was attributed to, and is there something that we can do to lean into that with activities and recreation to even expand upon that? Is there an opportunity there to like enhance that even more? I think it was recreation and entertainment. It was the visitors by activity category. I know we saw it.
I could.
Oh, there, I think you went past it. No, is that it? Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, and I did notice retail's down a little bit and all these things. Are there things that when you see things down and they need to be tweaked, are there strategies that your team comes up with or partners with our communications department on to enhance those? But also, if there's an opportunity to kind of lean into the recreation and entertainment part.
Because right now we focus heavily on restaurants, not as much on retail, and we focus heavily on recreation and entertainment. So as far as your main attraction goes, food and dining is probably one of the top things that we push.
Yeah.
Restaurant Week, of course, with its time helps tremendously. Having the influencers helps. We spend a lot on promoting your events, whether it's city events or the nonprofit events. Your good sports location from your Tucker Henderson Park and different aspects like that. Everything's down right now, unfortunately, because our hotels are down. Most of our businesses are down throughout all of Atlanta.
DeKalb or the Atlanta metro area.
So trying to focus more. We don't, again, we haven't, as far as I know, Sonia, we haven't really focused a lot on retail as much, but I could be wrong.
Well, and I would say this, actually, that I feel like that some of it will take care of the others, right? So like, I love the idea that of the, the soccer and the rugby and those things, those projects you're working on with the recreation department, stuff like that with with Rip and those guys. I love those ideas, and it's possible because it sounds like this is really kind of a new, like you're kind of moving into a little bit more of a new territory, and it could like enhance that. But I just love the idea that we've got an opportunity here where we seem to be up, and can we like lean into that a little bit?
Well, the good thing with sports is it has the people that can come out and do things. So when you're not playing, you're out playing.
Yeah, right.
In the city.
Yeah.
So with pushing the restaurants, it helps that. It also helps with the brew pubs in the
Mhm.
area. Different, with now you've got 2 new theaters that just opened up, which is going to help, I think, drive the market. Your theater performances in the rec center
Mhm.
or something. The arts side is becoming a new big push for us from the county level, but also from the Convention and Visitor Bureau level. So that's going to put some different dynamics in. Some of the other activities we're starting is storytelling, and that, I don't mean making up stories. I mean focusing on stories from a promotion point of view and
I'm
focusing
glad you clarified that.
documentaries and
It's just a story.
yeah, I don't want to make up stories. But, the thing about DeKalb and Tucker and all of our cities is we have great stories to tell.
Mhm.
We have great citizens. We have great culture. It makes it complicated to market that. But if we do it through storytelling, like we're one of the first bureaus, first one I know of anywhere, that we have 3 of our own movie documentaries coming out.
Yeah.
So we did the one on refugee soccer that actually had to go to Chicago this weekend because we're in the Illinois Film Festival. Are we on TV or anything? Are we being recorded?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I can't say the next thing that we're going to be in. It's really huge. But we bring Berlin and another place for our film. We're getting ready to finish up Buford Highway, which I know is not in Tucker, but focusing on international dining and focusing on food is just going to lift the whole county, which
Yeah.
will lift Tucker and its downtown, its restaurants around Tucker. Then we're doing one on Sugarbird boxing, which will help influence sports. So we're looking at different things that we can keep doing on that level. And we're looking at different ways that we can bring our van out and do not just podcasts, but interviews and some live action from the van, because the van is set up to go live internet from the van. So we're trying to do different things. To answer your question, we do talk about it all the time. We look at retail being more handled, I think, from everything we're doing versus specific piece on that. Now, we do sponsor Tony's event with I can't think of the name of it, the comic book place downtown and him with the games.
Infinite
Yeah,
reality.
Infinite realities.
So they work together. Now I know, I've just heard they're going to have their own event at a different time. So that kind of gets a little more of the retail
Mhm.
positioning out. But
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilwoman Weaver.
I had a follow-up since you were on this slide about the trends overall, because I feel like last year when you presented, maybe the trends were also down then. So can you give just like a little bit more detail on the historical trends and like what we should be thinking about around, I think particularly actually hotels and motels because of the tax component of that. I would just love a little bit more information about the overall like longer term 3 to 5, like in previous years, it was clearly like COVID or et cetera. So like, what is y'all's analysis of what that is?
you're probably not going to like the answer, but to try to get a full service hotel with some meeting space, not a convention hotel, but a full service hotel that has the ability to have smaller meetings, smaller conferences. Because right now your top hotel is the Hampton Inn at Mountain Industrial. And then the Holiday Inn Express, we do tremendous amount of business in that hotel with Emory for recovery patients. That's your 2 primary bigger influence hotels. And in the Courtyard, it kind of ebbs and flows with business. But if we could figure out how to get you a higher end flag with some meeting space, it would definitely help, because DoubleTree is not in your actual jurisdiction.
Not yet.
And so But I'd say we spent a lot on hotels because that's how we're funded. So most of our activities is trying to get you to stay because that's when we make money to spend more money for you. So we have a lot of programs that we do for the hotels. We have a lot of digital programs we do for the hotels with Google and Expedia and different places like that. But like we're looking at FIFA, and I just heard earlier today that like the Omni at Mercedes-Benz doesn't have rooms for June. Most of our hotels haven't booked yet for FIFA World Cup yet. So now the tickets haven't been actually released, the real tickets. So, but with the economy, with the way things are going, we're always trying to figure out what we're going to be doing to enhance getting people to stay here. But the biggest thing we're doing is really trying to brand the fact that we exist. That DeKalb is part of Metro Atlanta. So, not sure that answered your question, but that's really the best answer I can probably give.
No, it's helpful. I think in the future too, not just seeing year over year, but seeing how that compares to previous years and trends would also just be helpful. Just in situating, like, is it a long-term trend or a blip?
Well, and I know the hotels were saying from last year to this year that they're hurting. So we're not really projecting to be gangbusters this year unless we hit during FIFA. Now, I've always used the example with FIFA is 50% of what we thought, but our rates are as high as like with Super Bowl and the length of time that FIFA is, we're going to do really well because during Super Bowl, we didn't sell out, but our rates were so high, we made a lot of money. And you figure 8 Super Bowls theoretically is what they're saying. If we have higher rates, even if we don't sell out, we're still going to be doing phenomenally better, but that's 2 months theoretically.
And I had one other question that I think kind of connects to maybe the storytelling piece. And I had the question about the comic convention that's happening this fall, and if you'd connected, so I'm glad to hear that you were. But can you just speak to, I know there was a recent post about the number of people that are coming to the rec center, to the Orchard because of Stranger Things, right? And so people seeing it. So how do y'all work with the DeKalb Entertainment Commission on film industry type things around things like storytelling and like the tourism side of it, not necessarily the production side of it?
Not as well as I would like, because usually when we talk to them, they're so involved in trying to get the fees and the filming that they're not telling us who's actually in town. So we kind of find out when we're watching TV or watching movies. So
I'm wondering if there's not just while it's being filmed, but kind of like, again, that follow-up piece, like the Stranger Things example, right? So places where there's a cult following, or I know I'm personally obsessed with the show, but I'm not the only one. But like Will Trent, right, is filmed
yeah.
a lot in and out of Tucker, and like people get excited to watch like the episode that's on Main Street. So again, to more of the sort of after the fact, and as things are like, you know, once they're kind of close to being out in the world or they're out in the world, what it might be something to like think about and dive in deeper with our team.
Look at Covington. Covington
Yeah.
does that, and
Yeah.
also Sonoy.
Yeah. So really like tapping into the retail options and the restaurant options around interest in like in people who follow and kind of get obsessed.
those
with
two
it.
do a phenomenal job. Again, we've tried putting stuff together after the fact, really when we see it on TV or when I see it on TV or my staff. So I would like to figure out a better way to answer your question, but I, to this date, really haven't found a better way because we work extremely well with Shelby's team, but they don't actually tell us where anybody's going either. So we have to literally watch the show to pick up on it. I just found out, I was meeting with the mayor of Stone Mountain, that he had the governor's office, campaign office on Tulsa King, filmed at the basement of his hotel, which we didn't know. And then I went back and watched the show. So and then there was 2 places. So it's kind of like when we find it, we try to promote it that way. We have done a brochure a couple years ago on on that time, Tucker film trails to different places on. So we've done that in the past and look at doing that in the future, but it's more of a complicated thing than don't have a great answer for.
Right. Councilman?
Thank you for your presentation again this year. Despite the red numbers, I
Yeah.
think your organization and its management are encouraging into the future, so I appreciate it. You touched upon the source of revenue, a portion of the 8% tax. Do you have any statistics or knowledge of the whole annual revenue and maybe the top one or two places that revenue is spent to market or promote events?
Well, the revenues from the hotels, but we do not know what the numbers are from like VRBO or Airbnb. That would be interesting to actually find out. 50,000 of our budget, I know roughly 50 to 60,000 goes to Restaurant Week. So it's the top one source of what we spend. And then the rest of it is spread across the rest of the year. At summer events, winter events, sporting, marketing, sporting events, things like that. So, but Restaurant Week takes a big chunk right at the very beginning of our year, end of your year.
Well, without the RBO, do you have any idea just from the hotel tax portion?
Where it comes from? No, we're not allowed to. We don't know which hotel contributes what. We only get how much the hotels collect. The hotels send it to you all, but we don't get the breakdown from you to know who. Now, I would probably guess Holiday Inn Express and Hampton Inn are probably your two big ones, I would guess. Courtyard is probably third as a guess. But
Just in case I wasn't clear, and I apologize, the annual revenue that you take in from Tucker and use presumably mostly on behalf of Tucker, you have that figure kind of in mind?
I think it's around 500,000 is what we get.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that part of the question. I was going to actually find your true number before I left, but I forgot to look it up. But I think it's somewhere.
Well,
in there.
you can always follow up with us and
Okay.
you can go back and find that out and then email it to
'Cause
us.
I can tell you what you were last year's budget. You were less than last year's budget. I do remember that. And this year's budget is about like where you actually came in at last year for this year. So I have all that actually in my office because we have a board meeting tomorrow to pass the budget. I'm sorry, I wasn't getting that part of the question.
It took me 40 years to learn how to clear up my questions, so it's okay.
He tricks him in the courtroom like that. That's what he
Ah.
does. He's used to do. Okay, thank you, James. I appreciate you. And then follow up with us on those numbers.
Okay,
please. Thank
we'll
you.
do that. Thank you all.
Eric.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present the monthly financial update for January. We have a little bit of an improved report for you. I'll kind of explain those numbers that you see on the chart later on. But just an executive summary that we had is the revenues overall are still relatively on pace, but that's with all of our funds. The general fund itself has been limited on the revenue side. We have been short. We've been talking about the last couple of months. We'll go a little deeper into that when we get to that slide. Capital and SPLOST shows the intentional acceleration in our spending, although the spending is not there just yet in these reports, but we have those large budgeted numbers that you can see all these projects that we have planned out. And then stormwater remains self-sustaining with strong collections and reinvestment into the utility. So looking at the general fund here, so we're 58% through the fiscal year. Revenue is about 50% of what we have budgeted for the year. Expenditures are at 68%, I think. Yeah, it was 68% of the budgeted. It's not as bad as it looks. I have done more research. I have found some of those explanations for you. But one thing is, revenues are short by about $3 million this year to last year. But that would have encompassed about $2 million of the ARPA transfer last year to cover some of those personnel expenses that we used. Obviously, we don't have those funds anymore covering that. So that's going to be that biggest discrepancy, but that still is like a 1.1-ish million dollar shortage from year over year. Some of those things that do cover that, OTCs and building permits are probably the biggest ones that are behind paced year over year. We will work together. My staff in OTCs, they were a little bit late getting some of those renewals out. So we should see a bigger push at the end to kind of catch some of that up. But we were, even at the end of December, we were like $500,000 behind what we normally were throughout the beginning of the year. So working with my staff, and I'm going to be working with Courtney's staff to see how code enforcement can kind of, there's some that did not renew last year, and we can kind of capture some of those revenues as well. And then when you look at the expenditures here, the $18 million is obviously outpacing what last year was, but we had $8 million budgeted to transfer to capital to cover some of those projects. And you'll see that on the next slide, how the revenue is much higher in capital because last year we waited till the end of the year to do that transfer. And we're trying to do it more evenly so we can have a more consistent basis of where we're actually at. And then since I didn't explain what the new chart showed, the blue here is fiscal year 25's year to date versus 26's year to date is the gold in the middle. And then I added the gray, which is the budgeted number overall. So we're looking at the last 2 years, and then we're also comparing it to what the overall budget is for those funds. Here in the capital fund, obviously you can see the increase on the revenues. For that in the gold with the 8.4 revenue, obviously we have some money coming in on the capital side too, but general fund covers a lot of that as well with that $8 million transfer that we sent over at the end of December. And just like in the overview, you can kind of see how the $21 million in capital that's been budgeted, you'll see a very even higher number in SPLOST. So in here, and expenditures in SPLOST are not very high this year. They're actually behind where we were last year, or above last year, but this is the hard part. 320, SPLOST 1 was a major fund previously. SPLOST 2 started in 23. That's where like we are ramping up our spending because we were still spending all of 320 before we got to the 321 fund for SPLOST 1 and SPLOST 2. And then obviously this is the stormwater fund. They're pretty even. They're not spending as much on the expenditures. Obviously there's a lot of work being done out there. And I think it might just be timing. Obviously it goes up and down when they spend money. So. And then this is where you can find on the website. And if you have any questions for me.
All right, we have any questions down here? John, stop making me laugh. Any questions down here? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, here we come. The big one, Transportation and Trails Master Plan. John, you gonna introduce that for us?
Yes. And you know that we, obviously been working on this transportation trail plan for some time. We actually had a good meeting with the planning commission last week. And then you council are going to have 2 reads of this plan before you take adoption. So that would be at your April meeting. But I've known Richard for a long time. He's got over 30 years of experience. He's done a lot of context sensitive design solutions. He's done a lot of community outreach, and he's really going to focus in on some of the issues that have come up, particularly as they relate to complete streets and mobility, pedestrian connections. This is a very deep plan. It's got a lot of components to it, and it obviously also encompasses our extensive trail network. But this is really an opportunity for you, council, this evening to dive in and ask questions, because I certainly want you all to be excited about what we do in terms of adopting this document. Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, John, and thank you all. We're real excited about what we put together here, and we really want to get your input and again have that discussion as we move on. Also, wanted to introduce one of our staff members here, Dev Greenwood, who's also a resident of the city of Tucker. He came out here to kind of, he's one of our design engineers. Came to also listen to the presentation tonight and keep me straight, make sure I address all these questions and comments, Dev. Anyway, we'll jump right into it then. What we wanted to do to talk about tonight again is some of the primary plan elements that are included in the plan. A quick overview of the primary updates since the last plan, and then we'll talk about input from the public and stakeholders. And one of the main things we got a lot of input on from members of the stakeholder committee and in the community were the idea of complete streets and addressing the bicycle and trail network. So we're going to do a little more of a deeper dive into that topic area there. And then we'll talk about transportation funding at the end, which is always the thing that, how do we get all this stuff done, right? So we'll talk about some ideas there. So, so some of the primary plan elements, what's in the plan. This plan has 3 primary areas that it addresses. It's your comprehensive transportation plan update. So it looks at your overall travel modes for pedestrians, bicycles, transit access, and even truck and freight mobility. And it looks at that and tries to put together a plan that addresses all those different travel modes. It also does an update of your trail plan. So you did an original trail plan, major trail plan in 2019. This provides an update to that and more connectivity, looking at those elements. And another element that's kind of new is the safety action plan. And this is to allow you to take advantage of some of the funding that's come through the bipartisan transportation bill and through identifying a high injury network and looking at prioritization of safety projects. And so there's some parts of that related to safe routes to school and a Vision Zero component that we'll talk about too as we get kind of into here. Those are some elements kind of in the plan. And some of the things then that were updated, this is the last plan, just some of the highlights with the trail plan. Key sections, what it is, we had the key sections of the trail network identified in that trail plan before, and this really provided additional connectivity of those trying to let those streets stretch across the city and make some other key connections that were a little hard to make geometrically. So we came up with some ideas of how to do that in certain spots. And then shared use paths were emphasized, and we'll talk about that emphasis on the shared use paths and why that was when we did the plan. And then roads and intersections, with those, we focused on intersection improvements that address safety and bottlenecks. So when you read through the plan, you won't see a lot of major road projects. There's a widening of Mountain Industrial Boulevard. There's some major intersection kind of capacity projects, but just a handful of those. This plan really focuses a lot on those intersection and operational improvements when it comes to roads and intersections. And then the safety planning again. There's we took it during this process, took a deep dive into your crash history and causes, developed what they call a high injury network, which is what part of your network, what's the 10 or 15% where most of the crashes are occurring, and then developing some safety prioritization around that. So again, your prioritization criteria included safety, the top, access, connectivity, those various elements shown. Those are all things that went into prioritizing the projects, because when you look in this plan, you'll see there are many, many projects that were identified. The idea is which ones do you want to try to do first, second, and third? So that's where that process came in. So some of the input from the public and stakeholders, we'll run through that, and then maybe I want to make sure we pause before we get on the next technical part to talk about any other things that you think we may not have heard or that you think we should really consider for a point of emphasis. But so public and stakeholder engagement process, we had the project website, online survey, had good success at getting people participating through those venues. Also, the stakeholder committee, really valuable. Met with them 3 times, had some really good work sessions and interactive discussion there, and worked through the project that way. And then the 3 public meetings that we had, you can see some of the photos there. We had some good success in getting people talking to us and providing their input. So we took that and some of the things we heard, some of the top priorities that we heard from the citizens and from you all was, expanding that safe and continuous network of sidewalks, reducing traffic congestion and improving intersection flow. And then things like like connecting parks, neighborhoods, and businesses, and adding to the bike lanes and trails. Those sort of went hand in hand as kind of that third priority. So lower on the list were things like, major roadway capacity or enhancing parking capability. In fact, we had maintaining and resurfacing streets, but adding major roadway widenings was not even, one of the top ones that was listed. And so that's what we've emphasized in the plan, was that community connection. So then when we met with the stakeholder group, we had, a lot of input on different topics. The first time we met was really sort of a kickoff meeting. We did some extra tabletop exercises to understand where some of the challenges were. We had a 15-member committee, and it had residents as well as business owners there. Again, safety just kept coming up as a primary concern with growing number of pedestrians, and expanding those trail networks. Then with stakeholder committee number 2, we met, and that's where we really had our needs assessment done. We had looked and said, well, what are the needs throughout the city? What input can we have on those needs? And then one of the things that came up there was a lot of the safety impacts for cut-through traffic and people who are moving through your community, but maybe not part of the community, maybe aren't sort of being as respectful of safety as others that have more invested in being part of the community. And then traffic management discussion on the need for comprehensive congestion reduction. That was something that came up as well, and as well as other parts, trail discussion. Talked about loop connectivity and making sure that you have loops that kind of connect, that we don't just do a linear trail that goes to nothing, but that those connect around. And that was something that really we took to heart into how do we make sure this is connected with some of those more challenging connections to loop things back around. And of course, downtown Tucker being a top destination was important and emphasized by that committee. At that point, we came back and talked a bit about recommendations with that group. And then, and this is when, during the recommendations part, I think people started thinking a little more multimodal too, as I saw the other connections coming together. We had a little more connection and discussion about access to transit and what's MARTA doing with some of the things that they're changing here, and how do we make sure that our network is kind of supportive of providing those options for transit. And then, another major area that came up in discussion was La Vista Road at Tucker High School. And actually, one of the members of the committee was a student from the high school who she brought some really great insight throughout the process, but especially with safety going to and from the school. And so, another thing that came up was the need to integrate security considerations in these trails. So again, as the discussion evolved, some of the people started thinking and talking more about that implementation, idea, and making sure that we have good lighting and that we have security along those, along those trail sections. So that was kind of, a little bit of that. So before I just dive right in, and because I'll just keep on talking and talking, is there anything that you all wanted to kind of, any comments at this stage that you wanted to?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but
Okay.
let's see how it goes. Remember, you still got more to present, so we can
Okay.
ask some questions on those and then see how that flows.
I just since you talked about the community feedback and the priorities, and I was just curious, like, where sort of that slide comes from, because when I'm looking at the draft
Mhm.
plan, the priorities based on community feedback are a little bit different. So, in the plan, it has, so on this particular slide, I was trying to look at which slide it was. It has sorry.
Oh, further back.
Yeah, that one.
Mhm, yeah.
So on this one, it shows, and it's y'all have it list bike lanes, adding or improving bike lanes and trails listed 4th, but on the community priorities, in the plan, it actually has bike lanes at the 3rd and kind of slightly higher than the other one. And so, I don't know if, I just wanted to understand kind of what that was. Is that incorporating others? But specifically in the draft plan, it has, from the community feedback, top priorities, bike lanes is 3rd, by just a slight margin, which is fine. But when they're tied like that, I just wanted to understand why bike lanes was listed 4th versus higher up.
That's a good question. I'll go back and, it sounds like maybe we got it right in the plan, and maybe here I pulled from something that was more, early on, that may have come up as a question before, and we went back to look to see which ones were rated higher. So this might just be from a different presentation that was before this
Yeah.
was.
Well, thank you for that. And just the follow-up to about the community feedback. If you just, when you have a chance, can speak
Mhm.
to, I know this is kind of up until a certain point, but I know that there was the additional online survey through February 20th. Is that the online survey that you're talking about here, or was it an additional online survey?
It was the previous, yeah, the additional this does not include necessarily that information from this last survey. And we got a few comments on this last survey, but we didn't get a lot of comments. We got some specific comments about, wording and things like that in the report, but we didn't have as much of a comprehensive list of comments as we did earlier on in the process.
Good questions.
But those are good questions, and I'll make sure we go back, but I believe that what's in the report then is probably reflective of further discussion.
Any other questions on these two sections? We'll come back to you then. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Great, and because one of the things we wanted to definitely talk about sort of head on here, in a way, is this addressing complete streets in Tucker. We know that's a really important topic, and so we want to make sure that we get all your input on that and explain a little about some of the ways that we had looked at it from our perspective as we did the study. And so the way we looked at complete streets within the trail update is that a lot of the things that are being done as far as the recommendations with side paths and things like that is sort of that step in that complete, into complete streets. It's not necessarily a recommendation of a complete street on every street, but it was our, what we really thought and think is really valuable to you all is to have a list of projects that can be accomplished within a reasonable time frame that actually gives you complete streets on a network of roads and that can be used by all users. And so some of the things that we really emphasize with the idea of looking at the shared use paths is the idea that a variety of user groups can use those paths. So how the complete streets are addressed in the plan update is really that complete streets coverage doubles from about 9 miles, where you have about 4 plus or minus of trails and 4 plus or minus of bike type facilities now, to about 25 miles in your overall plan that's shown through short through long term, which means we've matched that to what potential funding sources are out there for you. There's also another, would take it up to 43 miles if there is more funding applied to that category of work. So we do have identified up to the 43 miles, but have that up to 25 miles in the funded portion of the plan. So why share youth paths? Again, maximizing that pool of potential users, including expert cyclists, recreational users, and younger users and families. We felt like also reducing some of the additional space that might be needed for bike lanes. One of the things that when we're looking at sort of the side of the road, for example, if you take what would be the area for a sidewalk and then make that into a shared use path, you might have even some additional buffering, but you're using that 5 feet that you would be using for the sidewalk over again. Whereas if you put bike lanes in on each side of the road, you're really having to put in the width of the bike lane, plus you would probably want to have a buffer with the volumes that you have. So we found that was, especially going back and retrofitting as much as you would need to, that shared use path made a lot of sense from that kind of perspective. And then adding bike lanes to the city's multi-lane roads versus via road diets. And that could, certainly something that could be considered as you move forward with your plan. We didn't show that a lot because of the fact that a lot of your multi-lane roads are carrying a lot of traffic volume. So if we take that volume down into those just a 2-lane road, you've got still a good bit of high speed and high volume traffic right next to a bike lane. And so for this next step and iteration of the plan, we really emphasize those shared use paths for that. And this graphic here, and I try not to hit you with too many maps because it's always hard to read maps when you're up in the thing, looking at them on your screen and all that. But this shows sort of the connected network with new sidewalks as well as the proposed multi-use trail and trail network. And so the idea there is when you think about walking, you've got a lot of connectivity across that whole area with the ability to use those trails and that sidewalk with that in place. And the next slide kind of takes the new sidewalks off and just shows the trail network. And so what this emphasizes is the idea that you've got a lot of connection for longer distances across the city. And then also the fact that we're trying to you can see that most of these kind of loop back to themselves, so that you have a few that are more linear, that are really connecting the things outside the county. But as far as within the county, there are a series of loops so that people can go around those. Another thing you'll see is that there's some green dashed lines shown in there as well. Some of those green lines are what we're calling neighborhood greenways. And so what a neighborhood greenway is trying to take those sections would be existing lower volume streets where we could put shared use markings on those streets. And so utilize that with a shared, because those volumes are low enough to do that. And that's a way for us to connect some of these difficult to connect areas that had to go through some of the neighborhoods. It also gives you an opportunity as you put this in place and you start putting those into place. There may be more and more folks then that start seeing the success of your trail network and say, wow, I'd like to have a neighborhood greenway through my neighborhood. And so that allows you to kind of come back in the future too, and to find more of those. And I talked with our team too. We hesitated to just put those all over the place because we're afraid people are going to look at that in their neighborhoods and think, well, that means we're going to do something tomorrow in their neighborhoods. I think that, when you take a stepwise approach to this, you can get your trail network in and get some of those there so that you get kind of that community buy-in. And some communities might think, I really like that. And others might say, well, I don't want to have shared use markings kind of through my neighborhood, even if it makes a good connection. So just a little more about, kind of our philosophy and where we ended up and why. So 34 kind of shared use trail, recommendations are part of the plan. One other thing, though, that we've thought a lot about since we've been getting comments on the idea of complete streets that we would maybe want to suggest is that you may want to consider including along with this plan, either in parallel or even just stated in the plan, the idea of a complete streets policy, whether it's something that you officially adopt or something that we just put as a policy statement into the plan that might make a more of a stronger statement towards your commitment towards, ultimately, having complete streets on as many streets as possible. We heard those comments. So, that might be something to consider. We still would recommend the idea of the shared use paths of the trail plan as your first step, and then building on that to have more of a full complete street network. Another thing we've looked at when we said implementation of complete streets is that, and you'll see when we look at some of the financial stuff at the end, we've got it right now about 17% of your budget is sort of transportation budget is used for these trail plans in what you're doing currently. And we kind of carried those same sort of percentages on forward. So, if you desire to get these done faster, increasing that amount of funding would be a way to do that, would allow you to do more of that. But I know that all has to be sort of balanced with other needs for congestion management and things like that. Proactive pursuit of additional grant funding and state and federal funding is really important too with trails. Trails are one of those where it's a little harder to get that state and federal funding. It doesn't fit as many categories. So making sure that you've got a process where you're continually knocking on the door at ARC, Atlanta Regional Commission, and other sources as new federal funding sources come out, that's a way to really try to make sure you're getting as much as you can towards your trail network. And then periodic reevaluation of the implementation program priorities is really important because trails are something that's sort of personal to people in a way, because you get out on there often with your family. A lot of folks do it to get to and from where they need to go, but a lot of people do it for recreation too. And so that's one of those things that we think is important with any kind of complete streets plan. And so if you were trying to implement a complete streets sort of policy, these are a few other things too that might be included into that kind of language. Ensuring that the planning, design, construction, reconstruction, and maintenance of transportation facilities within the city enables safe and convenient travel for all users. So the idea is not just doing it on things that you want to do new, but as you're reconstructing something, as you're having development come in, all those could be building pieces of that complete street network. And then, looking at, all transportation projects receiving city funding or requiring city approval, you might want those to go through a review of, should they be building part of this complete street network. Also, the street design should be context sensitive, reflecting surrounding land use character, including things like like residential neighborhoods, commercial zones. So there's not a one size fits all for complete streets, but that those be, kind of included in the context. And there's a lot of other details that can, also be included in those kinds of policies, but that gives you an idea of some of those things.
So I know you're going to have a lot of questions on those. So I think it would be a good idea to pause and
Yeah,
take
sure.
some questions there real quick. All right. Anybody down this way have questions on the complete streets? Councilman?
I like being singled out. Yeah, I guess I don't know where to start. Just so that we're all kind of like on the same definition, can you give me your interpretation and definition of what complete streets is, just so that everyone's kind of on the same page?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think a complete street's one that's going to allow for all users that are in that network. Now, if you don't have transit on a street, you wouldn't have necessarily transit be part of it, but biking, walking, vehicular access are all parts of things that you would have on a complete street. And so as you're looking at complete streets within your city, you're not going to necessarily have that on every single street because you're trying to build that network. But you've got, but within this network that you're developing, you would be adding those components.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I would consider.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think, the approach of mixing the trails and into a shared use path instead is pretty smart. I like that we're kind of adopting this mode, getting, bikes off the road, away from cars. One thing that I wanted, why I really push for the combination of the two plans. I think like last year when we kicked off this process was just more of like introducing complete streets and these paths and where they conflict or meet with cars, right? Like where pedestrians are crossing streets. I was hoping that we would see more recommendations in terms of when from the like capacity projects for intersections, where can we make adjustments? Where can we improve? If there is an area such as like a high use path that I think like our North Lake path, like where can we do protected intersections, where there where pedestrians and bikes are a little bit safer.
Okay.
One of the things that I think myself and council member Weaver kind of asked about was Chamblee Tucker. That went through a big redesign.
It did.
I'm just kind of curious why you guys kind of, skipped over that section for any kind of recommendations. Was it just not like feasible?
Okay. Oh, as far as like more improvements on Chamblee, I guess
Yeah.
we had really thought Chamblee Tucker had gotten a lot of improvements that it needed. With you've got a nice separation of the uses. Also, I think you have fairly frequent of these flashing beacon crossings along Chamblee Tucker. So I didn't. Maybe we may have overlooked something there, but it seemed like that was almost more of a success story, than something that needed a lot more enhancement. But that's something that we could certainly look at if you have specific.
Yeah, I think more specifically, I was just looking for like improvements in terms of the bike path. I know, we put them in, but they're just kind of painted lines with the rumble strips, right?
Okay.
While that's nice, I don't think most people feel completely safe when they use it. And I just actually drove down the road to take a look at Chamblee Tucker. The bike path is, just completely littered with like rocks and stuff that's very dangerous when you're riding.
Okay.
So yeah, I think early on in the process, we were kind of asking like, can we look at a barrier or can we convert it into like a shared use path? There's already a lot of right of way and dual sidewalks on both sides.
Let me go back and I'll circle back with our team and see what their thought process was on that. But that sounds like something that maybe we need to take another look at. If that was it very well might have been with the excitement of trying to make this connected network that seemed like it was already handled well. But maybe there's some things that could be improved. I know we also, when you talk about intersections too, we do have a lot of operational improvements for different intersections, including trying to do pedestrian upgrades. I don't know that we have as many of those like protected bike lane improvements, but I can have our folks go back and kind of check that list of improvements that we have and see if we do have some that we could say are kind of in that category, or if that's, something that they need to look at as well.
Okay. And then in terms of like more on the complete streets, from the courses that we take with GMA and all the various different academies for this, there's a lot of recommendations for slowing down vehicular movement. There's design guides. Is that something that we would typically do in a separate study and plan? If we're looking for elevated paths traversing neighborhood roads or something like that, or like looking for planters, bump outs, medians that are standardized.
I think we had a few corridors on here that we identified as being ones that would have some sort of a traffic calming type of improvements on them. But I don't know that we had like a whole sort of guide of exactly, what detailed, things would be put in place for that. But, okay, that's something that you think we should have a little more emphasis on?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that's something that we've been kind of really asking for, is just more standardization. So we know that when we are rebuilding a road or an intersection, this is kind of the bare minimum that we're going to get, right? This is the design elements that we should be expecting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll pass.
These are good comments. And like I said, we want to get your comments. We know this is a really important topic. So I want to take notes here on these topics. I'm not going to try to tell you we have something in there if we don't have it in there to that detail, but let us go back and look at all these comments and see, what we can do.
Councilwoman Schroeder.
So I appreciate you pausing for a few questions. I wanted to talk a minute about the trail system. You just talked about the percentage that we spend, and I'm curious, and you may have something ahead that you want to share, but when you look at the trail system, I keep envisioning a couple wins that are not huge, expensive projects. And I was curious if you maybe could go back and look at what you have drawn, and if there are some places where we might be able to allocate not millions of dollars to pave, or look at what we've started to see what we can complete that's more realistic. I had a couple thoughts in mind about the areas, but I didn't, it's not about directing you that way right now. I'm just saying it would be helpful, I think, to the council and the community. And then I think the other thing, I just want to go back to, we're kind of skipping around, but in this portion of your presentation, we talked about complete streets as well. And I'm curious, are there any GDOT roads that have complete streets?
It's a good question. I'm trying to think of GDOT roads. I mean, I guess you could say there are GDOT roads that have multi-use paths probably along them. I know there's been some roads, they've done a lot of roads, not a lot, but they've done some roads with bicycle lanes on them.
Okay.
I'm trying to think here. There was a time when, they thought about complete streets, and sort of GDOT's main thing was, hey, let's put a policy in and let's put bike lanes on certain roads when they were widening them or doing major improvements.
Right.
I'm trying to think of how many of them are right in this area, though, to point to, a lot of them were probably more outside of the metro area, quite honestly, because that's where they were doing.
Right. So, because I keep kind of wrestling with this plan from the aspect that we have 3 or 4 major roads that are, freight travel, well automobiled, very busy streets, congested. And I think about it's still our role to weigh safety. And if we can even add a bike lane to those major artery roads, or if it's smarter to really put our our resources, into the trail system.
You're
for
right, they're
them to drop
expensive.
off. And it's expensive.
Yeah.
But I mean, sorry, jumping around, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious from a standpoint of a GDOT road, which is which we need to be careful about the trucks. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we're in the city of Tucker, which I know you know, and our definition is that we have an economy of freight and warehousing and manufacturing. So some of that we have to weigh when we look at bike lanes and walkability. So I just kind of wanted to ask that question, like, where is that as an example? Can we aspire, or is that not a realistic opportunity?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah, that's a great comment. And I think that some of the things, like when you talk about the longer term, you look at, say Mountain Industrial, for example, there's a longer term project there to widen that project. Now, as you widen that project, that'd be the time to really go in, I think, and do something that's a buffered sort of a bicycle facility, or that might be a chance to put in buffered bike lanes on the road. The thing is with a lot of freight traffic and a lot of volume, you only get certain users on the buffered bike lanes. So sometimes it's better to be on the multi-use trails. Another thing that comes into consideration is when you look at a multi-lane road and you think, well, gosh, those lanes are kind of wide. Couldn't I just take that and put a bike lane in? And one of the challenges is you just don't quite have enough width. So when you reduce that width down, you might get enough to get a bike lane in that's a little smaller than you like, where you might say, well, I have 6 feet, but part of it is the gutter that someone would be, using, and not usually enough room for a buffer. So to meet kind of the current, industry standards of putting a buffer in there on a high-speed road along with a bike lane usually means you have to reconstruct the curbing and the drainage and all that. And so once you get to that stage, you might be better off utilizing the shared use path, because then you get people away from that volume of traffic. So that was kind of a little bit of the way we would think about those kinds of roads. Now, that doesn't mean that there may not be ways to, for safety, reduce the width of the lanes or something like that. But
Well, something to think.
since that's kind of,
Yeah.
the way we approached it, at least,
Yep, thank you.
No, those were great points.
Kind of to follow up on both of those, I think while I appreciate having the recommendation to have a complete streets policy. What I'm concerned about is that was acknowledged and named in the first transportation plan that we did.
Okay.
And trails, right? We named 4 roads that should be complete streets, one of which was Brockett Road, which didn't happen, right? Because of XYZ, other conditions and things, and we were doing traffic calming and all kinds of other things. So when we talk about where we're doubling the miles in the plan, knowing that sometimes plans stand as ideas, not as actual things that get implemented. I would love to talk about complete streets. What I hear a lot from different folks is, well, if we can't do a complete street, we can't do anything at all. And there's even a little bit of that I'm feeling around bikes specifically, but not just bikes, but like safety in general. And so having a vision, and that was one of the reasons I was asking about the priority around access for people on bikes, right? Access for cyclists, safety around cyclists, whether it's a bike lane or a shared, use path. I think those are great ideas, but given, again, the focus on our budget, even though we have a SPLOST plan that explicitly names sidewalks and bikeways, we still don't seem to prioritize that in the design. And so I'd love to just see not just the complete streets policy, but an ethic of what are the ways, maybe with the things that Councilmember Nguyen was talking about around design guidelines, what are the ways that we are getting to the ethic of a complete streets policy, even if we can't deliver a perfectly engineered, best in class, complete street, but what are the ways that we are putting those principles that are important? I think the Vision Zero piece that y'all highlight is something that would be really great to highlight more, perhaps even having other examples. I mean, ideally in the state of Georgia, but if we can't get it, I know for a fact that Plan RVA in Richmond, the greater Richmond, Virginia region, has had some award-winning programs around this and prioritizing safety and even predicting and addressing predictively that. Yeah. So I think having some examples of ways that we can tap into that help us get to this, and I'll say about Chamblee Tucker, those are not bike lanes. And one of the reasons that we don't clean them up is because they're not official bike lanes. They were a median that we got rumble strips. And, to your point, I understand why we might not say, oh, the road diets that we've done are places to put bikes. It's not safe. People may not ride it. There are people riding it right now.
Yeah.
So like, so the other piece of this is how can we get into the data around what is currently happening and try to help make it safer and not just
Okay.
say, well, we're just going to push people off the roads. My concern with the way that we're currently approaching this, you know, in our budget is that roads we are going to continue to invest in. We are going to invest and make and we're going to repave our roads. That is something that's not going to change. And so if we are committed to that super firmly, and it's like, well, if we get to it, we'll get a shared use path. Or if we get to it, we'll get this. We're still not kind of putting the priority that, again, I'm seeing in the community priorities
Mhm.
as that. So I would just like us to, like that to be kind of acknowledged and addressed like a little bit more fully. In how we talk
good.
about implementation of the whole plan as we move forward.
Okay. And I like the comment about the design standards and the need for more of that in there. And I'll definitely go back. We'll definitely take a look at that. And maybe there's a way to tie, tie more strongly this Vision Zero, goal, commitment to how not just, hey, this works with priorities, but how does that work and relate to what the design function, and form should be. And that might be something for us to do as homework and come back to you guys with some update on that.
Councilwoman Reese.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
So I have some specific questions, and I just feel like I don't know that you would remember certain specific roads. So feel free to get back to me
Okay.
if not. But I want to talk about the south and the east portion of the city,
Okay. Yeah.
East Ponce,
Mhm.
and then the Juliet Road corridor.
Yes. Yes.
So we actually did a complete street
Mhm.
on Juliet Road about 2 years ago. But the data, two things I noted in the report that the data showed like concerns about safety along East Ponce to Leon, which we
Mhm.
do have a trail that goes through a large portion of that.
Yeah.
And then we also added sidewalks we finished out sidewalks for the rest of East Ponce down to Idlewood. And then there was also concerns about the Juliet Road safety. And I was just curious about the data around that because I'm hopeful that the
Mhm.
complete street that we put in, a couple of years ago or so on
helped, yeah.
Juliet Road would have helped and would have improved. So I was curious about that. And then I
Okay.
wondered if so that is, I'm still getting used to the shared path because in my mind, I've been talking about trails. I see the Stone Mountain Trail as a shared path. Is it not?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is.
So there was data in the report about concerns about the safety. And one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about with this report, with your slide presentation and the report overall is the safety of the
Mhm.
community. Like when we are putting things in place, we need to, Vision Zero, the injury network, we need to be looking at all those things. We need to be paying attention. Safety is utmost, right? But with that side path along East Ponce, it kind of concerned me with it talking about, I was just worried, I guess, about are we seeing, cars leaving the road? You know what I mean? Like that's because as we're, I'm really, really eager. And clearly from the report, the community is very, very eager to get the trail network in. That's one of the top priorities. We also want to just make sure, even along Hugh Howell Road, for example, which is a project that we're in the middle of building out
Yeah.
that side path. We want to make sure that folks are safe even on that. There is a strip there and it feels safe. They're not dealing with traffic, but I still got a little bit of an anxiety in my stomach about just making sure that we are choosing the safest mode. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you can comment on that in those two particular examples.
A little bit, and definitely want to look back at the specific, was Juliet Road. Let me go back and look to see, did those crashes happen before or after? That would be a great time slice to look at. In fact, we could look at a little bit earlier data if we needed to do a before and after to kind of see that. I think that's something that's worth doing. I think with East Ponce, I know one of the things with the trail there that's a challenge is some of the access to the trail too. You know, there's not great crossings getting to the trail. I know that that trail's being looked at a little bit separately as well to try to see what can be done to along the length of that Stone Mountain Trail to enhance, you know, some of the safety along that. But that's, I think, some of the things that were coming up there. And that sort of that and the other one kind of leading together the idea of the trails along the road. One thing that usually when people are either walking on a sidewalk or going on a trail along the side of the road, that's actually a pretty safe place to travel. Now, I don't know about the ones where the sidewalk is right up next to the road without any, you know,
Right.
but those, you know, have much more of a chance and risk associated with, but statistically, you're usually pretty
Okay.
safe along a side path or whatever. When the challenges are, if you have a lot of driveways that are crossing the side path or street crossings, even minor ones, those are areas that you really have to be intentional with the design to make sure that everyone either can see it or know what they're supposed to, you know, to do.
Right.
So those are things that are probably more important to look at. And then also crossings too. If you got a trail on one side of the road and you have people that are like, I want to get over there, do they have enough of a gap in traffic and a way to get across? You know, one thing that you did that was really positive along you know, along Chamblee Tucker Road are those pedestrian crossings that allow people, you know, fairly frequently to get across the road. And quite honestly, because you have those there with those medians, even when people don't cross there and they cross someplace else, there's kind of an awareness of the drivers as they drive down that road that, hey, there's pedestrians here because I've just crossed 4 or 5 crosswalks, right? So those are things that, yeah, that could be considered as part of, and again, when you get to these design standards, that might be something that should be called out more in these standards when we talk about putting these roads in place. So.
I think some safety is just being safe on the trail that's not along the road and removed. I think that safety came up a lot of lighting
Yes.
and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, protection. So I think there's 2 different safeties being mentioned in these.
That's a good point.
plans.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I just want to say one more thing. I want to piggyback on what Councilmember Schroeder said, because that was important to me too. Just looking at opportunities, you know, quote unquote, low hanging fruit. You kind of triggered that in my mind about the striping and things like that that we can do with budget constraints. I'd love for us to be able to, you know, pinpoint areas around the city. We're about to talk about transportation funding and stuff like that, but you know, trails, like you're talking about crosswalks to get to the trail, you know, even intersections and things like that. There might be opportunities we could do some of those items more quickly as we're working along our 2050 vision, your 2050 vision of trails and transportation projects.
No, that's good. Yeah, let us, yeah, we will definitely do that. Let's look and see, are there some things you can say, hey, these are some initial successes that you could point to or that could be, you know, agreed upon that would be things to make sure are at the top, sort of highlighted, featured projects almost kind of thing.
All right.
Oh, yeah, next one. Yeah, that's right. This is short. This is really just talking about transportation funding and really just overall kind of a synopsis there. So what this plan kind of includes is when you look at the roadway, again, the roadway capacity, not a huge idea but there's some important projects. There's 9 projects in there that are, you know, there's the ultimate widening of Mountain Industrial. There's a few other small roadway connections along Mountain Industrial to help make that work better. And then there are some intersection improvement projects that are larger than, we've got a lot of smaller ones listed under the operational improvements, but there's a few that have more capacity associated with them. And then the operational improvements, that's got a lot of intersection type projects that are geared towards safety and have identified areas that need, you know, improvements to crosswalks and sidewalks and all that. But maybe there can be a stronger linking of that to design standards so people know more. Well, what are you getting or what are you thinking of when you do that? That would be something that we could take out of words and put more into examples. But there's a lot of those projects in there. And then sidewalk again, we've got a lot of projects in the midterm kind of on the sidewalk and some short and long term. But then the trails, that's where you're kind of going from the 9 miles to the 25 miles. So at the end of that, you end up with the 25 miles of trails. This kind of shows how the costs break down short, mid, and long term. The graph on the bottom, you can see that the gray is kind of the city's local funding that you would use, and the blue is state and federal funding. And then the gold is kind of the total. So you can see with your road and sidewalk plan, you've got a lot of state and, or a lot of local funding and some state and federal funding. With trails, you can see in the short term, they're kind of balanced, but that's not usually the way it is. It's just you've got some federal funding here, state funding recently that can be brought to bear there. And that's why the total we had for the short term on an annual basis was a little higher. We'd hope you'll get that same sort of additional funding later on, but we didn't want to assume that from the start. But you can see there, when you look at the trails, I mean, a lot of times that assumed amount of funding from the Fed and states is pretty low. It's a lot that gets put on the local agencies' sort of shoulders to have to do that. So trying to find ways to get that funding and bring that blue line up would help. The other thing is just looking at the amounts there. You've kind of got about 17% overall, I guess, on your trail network. So obviously, whatever priorities you want to place, but that's a way to do it. A way to get it done faster would be to put more money to it, but that's always done at the expense of something else. So that's basically, I don't think I had another. That was all I had.
Thank you for having maintenance on there too.
Yeah, that's
because
what I mean.
I don't want to build anything if we can't maintain what we've already built. So that's super, super, super important.
Thank you for putting this up. One question I have is, so, because I mentioned in my last set of questions about our SPLOST.
Mhm.
So what's the rationale for putting roadway and sidewalk together as a separate from, like, as sidewalks being separate or not combined with trails?
I think we did that because the trail plan sort of had its own, had its own plan, right? So we were trying to, the things that really related to what was specifically in the trail plan
Okay.
went into that category.
So I would just say it might be helpful to have maybe a subcategory that kind of distinguish sidewalks again from like roads, especially if we're
Yeah.
trying to, again, figure out like, because to me, it's
Yeah.
cars versus non-cars is part of my, perspective and what I'm
okay.
getting at. And so kind of that framing. And also, again, given that our SPLOST is broken up, roads is separate from sidewalks and bikeways,
Okay.
and which trails also fall under.
Yeah.
So our funding sources are very explicit, roads separate from sidewalks and trails. So I just want to name that.
Yes, we'll break sidewalks off.
And kind of, I think, to the small win or winning projects.
Mhm.
I'm interested not just, and I think I'd brought this up before, and it definitely got sort of lost in like the decisions about the priorities, which is fine. But, having some frameworks for assessing the generalized economic impact of when you spend X number of dollars on a trail or a
Okay.
sidewalk in this particular type of area or zoning, what the economic impact is. So,
Okay.
and being able to speak to that and talk about that. So, yes, not a detailed like economic assessment of each individual trail,
Okay.
but trails in certain commercial or mixed use areas having in a generalized statistically, this is the amount of time that you would expect it to help generate additional investment
Mhm.
versus a solely residential area. So when we are talking about where the places that we're using our limited dollars for, we're not just looking at a vacuum of information of like these
Yeah.
dollars do like $5 million here and $5 million in this other place may not actually have the same return on investment
Okay.
for the city. And so how we think about that. So I would find it helpful. And I think we had sort of hoped that that would be part of it. So when we're talking about where are the winning projects that we can put in quickly,
Sure.
where are also the ones where we can make the case to taxpayers of by doing this, this is going to generate X much more investment and X much more dollars outside of your tax
Okay.
dollars that you're paying.
Yeah, and we've got some data on that. You're right. Doing it on an individual trail basis is a little, but it'll be interesting to say if these are priority projects, here are some of those and what does that sort of generate by doing that? And then there's another one when you say if you do like a large program, how much that does. It's a little harder with one trail, although I've seen it broken out where it says, well, it could impact property value for these 100 houses, and it can impact this much. But then the idea of, well, does it attract people to go to businesses and things like that? With just one trail is not as, but I like the idea of maybe grouping it into like, hey, here's your your short-term wins, what those do. And you could always divide that per mile or something. And then we could, so yes, we'll let us give that some thought and come back to you on that. I remember you asking that question in our December briefing as well. So.
So one of the things that I've been very mindful of as a council leader is the vision and how we kind of figure that out as we move forward. And I feel, and I think the plan, the draft plan that's over, almost 180 pages is very well done. I think that you listen to our community, you listen to the stakeholder group. So thank you. I'm just curious about, we have our own capital improvement project list already, and we've incorporated a lot of transportation projects, and we're moving forward with those. And at the same time, this comes back and it says we might need to refocus over, in this area or this area. And I'm just trying to figure out how all that fits together, because we're already currently focusing on a huge amount of projects, in my opinion, because they're so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious when you get into like page 180 and there's all these lists of top priorities, how that's going to play out long term for us. And if we say that this is a 2050 plan, then I can say, oh, then we can pause on some of these top priorities. And yet I'm curious how you might recommend,
Mm-hmm.
with what we're already doing, how we're going to shuffle some of the newer priorities through surveys and input. So I just feel like it's not, and I'm sure that's what every transportation engineer feels like. So I'm just saying, I
Okay.
understand that hat.
No, that's a good, that's a good question. And so we can go back and look at the capital improvements program, and usually your program, you've got longer term, so I think, I guess my thought was that you're looking at this as your comprehensive sort of transportation plan in a way. So it's giving you, guidance on, probably more guidance on the middle and long term. Then there's a little more shuffling if you wanted to change things in the short term, or you might want to stick with what you have and move forward and bring this in a little bit over time. And that's something that we could look at, because you all have pretty defined, 5-year, work programs. So
It's
again,
true.
maybe we can work together and let's dissect that work program and how it sort of relates to these short-term improvements, and see if we need to make some adjustments in what we
Right.
have programmed for short-term.
That's true. And I find that, especially since I was campaigning last fall, a lot of our community gets really excited about what we're going to do next. And now we're having to say to them, oh, we've got to slow down. We don't have as much resources. So I think we need to be very realistic about that list of what we need to do first, second, and third, and
Okay.
really, really focus on what we're already doing that's going to make some major changes to the community for
Okay.
transportation.
Those are good points. I say some of you are ARPA babies. You came on council and we had flush funds and lots of money from COVID and lots of stuff going on. And now that is gone. But we made very good use of it, because there are some cities and counties that hired people with those funds and now they're laying them off. So I think, a good job was done on those funds, but they are no longer
Yeah.
available. So we're back to reality.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a little harder. And also knowing you guys set the priorities for the short-term funding. So
That's right.
we don't want to come in and say, oh, this is what you should do. We won't be able to, but maybe Ken and I can talk and look at this and bring back some suggestions that is either part of the plan or part of a, offline thing for you guys to be able to know when you're doing your capital improvement program.
And they shuffle sometimes too, right?
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
Those things can shuffle too. And
Yeah.
just because it's written down doesn't mean we have to do it. Right?
Yeah,
We gotta-
especially in this plan. This plan is your guide. It's not.
All right, final questions down here, and then we need to move on to parking.
Great. Um, can you give us a little bit more information on like a breakdown of where all this funding is going in terms of the short term and the midterm, like what percentage is going to roadway operational, what
Mhm.
percentage to shared path?
Yeah, well, I guess that's what we used these numbers as sort of a guide to what we could fit in say the midterm plan for roadway, was, we constrained to say, okay, midterm is really the same amount of, basically the same budget burn per year that you guys have been having. The idea then is we're operating kind of in, as we move forward this plan, looking at it in current year dollars. So it's sort of a plan based on the same levels of funding.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm just a little curious on why we're seems so aggressive on the operational projects versus, you know, like the sidewalks and trails where the numbers are almost inverse, right? Where we're doing small amount of sidewalk and trails first, but we're gonna take care more of them in the mid and long term. And then the operational is like, we're front loading a lot of that and then kind of tapering off.
I think what it is, the operational projects are smaller too, because they're more intersection based. Some of your trail projects, particularly some of the ones you're going to want to do earlier, might be a little longer segments. So that, that's probably part of the, you know, part of the reason. Also, those operational, a lot of those are safety oriented projects. So trying to make that, you know, sort of a priority. But we can provide, I'll look back in the plan and make sure it's broken out, but want to make sure that you guys get an idea, well, what exactly is it that's in the short term, all the things that are in that, in the midterm and the long term, that's very clear. Because really what that does, that came out of the prioritization process, but then some of the larger projects take longer. So you can't say just because of the top priority, necessarily in the short term, if it's going to take a little longer to develop and things like that. But yeah, that's probably why there's a lot more operational projects than trails early on.
This might not be the right meeting for this question, but I'd like to have us dive a little bit deeper into a lot of the operational and intersection improvements. I know a lot of them were labeled as safety improvements. I just kind of I would like some more information on like what makes it safer, who's it safer for? Is it just for cars? Is it for bikes?
Okay. Yeah.
People?
Okay.
And then I know the Lawrenceville project is kind of a different plan, but there's also, you know, we also have like La Vista and Hugh and you know, I drive those pretty regularly and I always look at the conditions of our sidewalks. One thing I noticed is, you know, I think our current sidewalk width is 6 foot minimum, but realistically after, you know, dirt and plants and grass overgrown ends up being like 2-3 feet of actual usable. I didn't see any kind of recommendations on adjustments for sidewalk widths.
Okay. I'm trying to remember if we had a sidewalk with what we specified for 6 feet. Okay. 8 feet if it's that's right. Yeah. I think 6 was the standard. You have a lot of them that are 5 though, because that's was the old standard. So a lot of the stuff that was put in years ago is actually 5. So it's a little bit narrower even than the 6. People like 6 feet because it gives you that ability to kind of, you know, 2 people maybe walk beside each other a little more. It's a little more comfortable walking area. But you're right, Kenya. Once it gets to 8, you're sort of it can be used as a multi-use path, and that's something to be considered, you know, too when you are looking.
Then maybe we consider
at
that.
streets.
Yeah, I think we should, right? Just looking at current trends of how these sidewalks are used, especially in our city, a lot of them are being used as bike paths. People are afraid to ride on the road, rightfully so. So I'd like us to make that adjustment because it's already being used, right? I like to plan for what the current reality and not what we wish people would do with these sidewalks.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. No, this is good. This is a lot of great.
Councilwoman Troche, I'm waiting for something profound to come from you because you've been so quiet. You good? Okay. All right.
There's a
Thank
lot of
you.
great comments too. So what I would say is we're probably not prepared to come back in just 2 weeks for adoption. I think we'll want to come back to you with some answers to some of this stuff and really kind of address that.
One more, last one.
Well, it's more of a summary to the point that you made about the second feedback survey and not getting a lot of feedback on it. One, that was during the double ice storms. I don't know that we did a lot of enough publicity about it, I guess would maybe be a way to frame it. And so, especially if there's a chance that any of the things that we've asked are going, like the draft is going to change it all from the December version, and a chance to kind of get it back out in front of for that feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's sort of like I happened to see it, I think, on my Facebook. So I didn't even see it in like a weekly report or anything like that. So I think I would love to see an updated version that incorporates some more of these questions and some answers, and then potentially, I know we have talked about this, like the Atlanta Regional Commission, I think does a good job of both asking for feedbacks and comments and then providing non-defensive answers
Mhm.
to those comments. And I'm not saying yours are defensive or not defensive.
Okay,
I'm just saying
good.
ARC
Yeah.
is very like, I think a little more technical, just technical about how they respond. And so I would just be great to feel like we really got it out there in front of some folks. And then
Okay.
before we do that, I would suggest
Mhm.
just a quick spell check and some grammar things like. and
Okay,
some
yeah, we had
names
heard
of
that we
some
might
people,
have,
and, I mean, I'm happy to send it to whoever, but there's a
Mhm.
couple of things in there that, and from an
Sure.
accessibility standpoint,
Mhm.
it would be great to be able to zoom in on these maps.
Okay,
And you can't. And so if there's any way to be able to allow people, I don't know if it's working with our GIS team or something like that,
okay.
but to be able to look at the graphs that you've shown that are great, that have the comprehensive piece, but then you can't zoom in on the specific, intersections or even just micro areas.
Okay.
So it'd be great to just be able to have a little bit more interactivity with it to be able to understand what you're presenting.
That's great. No, let me get with our folks and see what we can do there. You're right. ARC does do a great job of that. I think another thing that would really be great if we wanted to go back out again is all of you all after this input session and maybe looking at it again to reach out to all of your constituents too and really get them to dive in and take a look at it. I think that's really gonna help us to make sure we're capturing all those comments.
And the, I know the Tucker North Lake CID sent it out too in their
Yeah.
newsletter,
Yes.
everything as well.
We have 2 weeks of the ordinance.
Mhm.
Coming back In March,
Mhm.
and then you'll be coming back in April, so I think we've got time for. Okay,
Do what you can.
okay.
Yeah, let me try. We'll try. I just know they had a lot of comments and I didn't want everybody to feel rushed. So let's talk maybe if we can, John, and see if that makes sense for us still to stay on that.
Look, no one's dead.
But
nothing
we will
but
try to
fire,
get it as quick as we can, but I want to make sure we are thorough in answering.
right?
Yes, we can, yeah.
We can
certainly want
defer it, we can
products,
do what we
can
need to
certainly
do.
Work with that. We do have a 65 spread, spread between our ordinance reads, so we may have to do something where we push it out a little further, but that's all
Mhm.
good.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Thank you for enduring this. I feel like you need some chocolate or something.
It's great. It's
Good.
great to, we really enjoyed working with the city and with you all. And so we want to make the best product that we can for you.
Thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate you very, very much. All right. Parking. Come on, Micah. Micah, I'm going to set the tone for this just a little bit. I had some people ask me like, y'all are still talking about parking. And I said, no, actually council's never really been able to get together and talk about parking. You talk about parking and I talk about parking and other people talk to us about parking, but we've never been here together to actually talk about parking and answer questions. And there's been some updates. So we're not just still talking, we are now digging into some options and some solutions. So really appreciate you and all the work that you've been doing on this.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm excited to be able to talk about this in a way that's not overshadowed by an ordinance immediately behind it. It doesn't shape the conversation that way. It could just be open conversation. And surely this will be easier than $250 million presented right beforehand. So this should be a good conversation.
That's what a parking deck,
All right.
not more.
Let's throw a little more on. All right. So just wanted to start and give you guys a little bit of a backwards look and some of the questions that we're going to be trying to answer here. But I'm going to go about 25% of the way through this presentation, and then we're going to have a stop point to discuss, and then we'll go through the end of the presentation because this first part is going to be the most, I think, conversation heavy part, and then we'll go beyond that. So just a reminder, some of the stuff we've done, and I'm going to say, they always tell you don't read off the slides. That's not professional. I'm reading off this slide because the public's reading off the slide, so I'm going to be doing right down the slide in order because the best way to make sure everyone is on the same page. So we just completed some new parking spots at the Tuckertown Green. Of course, about 2 years ago, we expanded 100 new parking spots at the Main Street Church that brought that into a shared parking agreement, which was great. And then last year, we also improved the CSX parking lots. So we've been, consistently treading along, making progress. I wanted to highlight a couple of just sort of generic public feedbacks as I sort of aggregate the things that I'm hearing. These are just 3 sentences that I think are representative of the type of comments that we get from people. Businesses have seen increased business due to the activity at Tuckertown Green, but they're eager to see ongoing improvement. We see examples of residents declaring that if they cannot get parking on Main Street in 2 or 3 passes, that they just skip lunch and they just don't stop on Main Street. And then the last one there, while there is general support for time-limited parking, there are definitely questions about whether it's the right tool or an effective tool in Tucker at this time. So those are 3 different sort of interpretations of what's going on, and that hopefully we can sort of address those narratives. Just a reminder of the sort of strategic approach the city is prioritizing. We're looking at low capital investment projects first, certainly improved communication always, and then demand management with time-limited parking, and then potentially capital investment, but that's not really the heavy part of the focus today. So I'm going to run through here. We have on the side, you see these little shadow icons, and these are representative of the 5 topics we're going to cover tonight. So we have a solicitation that we're going to be discussing, and that's going to be a big, heavy part of the first discussion. And then the following 4 items are our 4th Street Reclamation Project, which is something we're bringing before the public for the first time that we've been discussing for a while. We're going to just do a quick overview of the ongoing evaluation of low capital parking solutions. And then we will get to time-limited parking and discuss the ordinance. And then we'll end at a sort of the reminder of what that passive communication overhaul looks like that we discussed in November, and just a reminder of kind of what some of the monies could look like if we, move forward with all these things and charge into the abyss on this. So in November, we did go out and get quotes from 5 firms. These were 5 firms that had come to us over the last year and a half, and expressed interest in Tucker. They're local, they have people here, they do a good business. And so we had conversations with a number of them over the year, and basically we asked them for their best approach for Tucker based on the time hour or the 4-hour time limited parking ordinance that was proposed at that time. Our question to them was, how would you approach Tucker? It was kind of a white box. Several of these firms have many technologies. They've got 6 or 7 different tools that they can use. And so we asked them to really just pick one and recommend us what they think is the best fit. We did end up getting just 2 bids out of that. Both of them were professional firms with a variety of approaches available to them. And there were generally 4 viable technologies that we could consider in Tucker, but really not all of them, not all solutions are available in Tucker just because of our layout and the type of setup that we have. It's just unique situation compared to other areas. So there are 4 possible technologies that we could really consider. We could consider a license plate reader related technology. We could consider something that involves in-person enforcement with like someone who's generally sort of staffed downtown quite a bit. Neither of those are things that I'm going to be recommending to you as a best fit for Tucker. The next 2 options are the sort of paid parking applications. They're not necessarily paid. They can be free, but they're self-reporting. So you go somewhere, you go into a parking lot and they've got a sign and you scan it and you pay $1 and then it's $1 an hour or whatever. You can set those up to be free. That could be an option, but it's self-reporting. And the last option is magnetic pucks, which is the option that I'm going to be recommending to you tonight and that we'll be discussing in more detail as a technology solution. So we had a couple different things. One of the firms really did lean heavy on having a person come out and be available quite a bit, which I appreciated. They were Tucker people, and they said, Tucker's the type of place that would have a person. And so that was something they honestly suggested to us as a viable approach. So that's why I've got these 2 here as the cost-benefit analysis, but always we can have a wider discussion, whatever you guys want to focus on. I'm going to start on the left there and talk about the magnetic puck technology and explain why I believe it's got the best cost benefit for Tucker and sort of understand what that technology is about. So the puck technology is a magnet about 4 inches wide that sits in the pavement. So we would cut a little square in the pavement and we would install a circular puck. They have these at intersections all over the place. If you've ever seen a weird little square cut at an intersection on the ground, that's what that is. So the magnetic puck technology, it collects anonymous data. All it tells us is if there's a large piece of metal on top of it. So if you've got a car parked over it, it senses that your car is there because it's magnetic. If you roll a motorcycle over there, it should be magnetic. If for some reason you have a car made of paper mache, then it is not going to know you're there. But generally, that's kind of how it collects the data. One of the benefits of this particular approach, as opposed to some of the other options that could exist, is that it really has a sort of foolproof data collection mechanism, which is just a magnet. It's consistent, metals in all cars and all engines. That's not something you're going to be able to trick. It's not reliant on a person to go down there and look at the technology and, take a picture of a car or anything. You can just connect it. One of the things that really set this particular bid apart for me is that they do have a live public-facing phone application that can come along with the technology. So I will welcome the public and you all, potentially if you'd like to after the meeting or whenever, if you want to take a quick break and look at it on your phone if you like. But there's a phone app, for an example, called Park Glen Falls, New York. So just before I came up here, I searched it. And it was like the 10th application down because they're not SEO paying money for it to be the top one when you look at your phone. But basically, the application has a live map that shows green parking spots that are open and red parking spots that are full. And it's a way to sort of track and understand what the numbers are in the area. Not, I would say, a good, like Google Maps, it doesn't tell you how to get to this one parking spot. It's not made for that. It's made to give you a sense of what's going on in those areas, and you can zoom in and see if a spot is open, but it's not a navigation tool. It's more just a tool to look in and understand what the data says. All right, moving down the line. This technology could allow for rather lean enforcement. The reason I say that is because if you park your car over a metal puck, we can set it to create automatic notifications. So if a vehicle sits there for 3 hours and 45 minutes, we can set it to email someone at City Hall, like a code enforcement officer. And in that situation, we have collected all the information we need to know without ever having to use a human, without ever having to analyze it. And if no one stays more than 3 hours and 45 minutes, in the example of a 4-hour time limit parking, then our staff never have to engage with the technology. But after a certain threshold, our staff will be emailed, and then we would find a way to distribute the work. Maybe on this day of the week, this person responds to all of the time-limited parking emails that get automatically generated. And it says, okay, in this spot, someone has been there for 3 hours and 45 minutes. We need an officer to drive down on Main Street and check in with the vehicle at 4 hours. And so if no one violates a time-limited enforcement, a time-limited ordinance, then no enforcement officer is needed to show up on scene. And that does feel very lean. If we do good signage, if the community knows we're serious about enforcement, then it's got its own like sort of self-efficacy that it should require less and less attention over time. It's got a relatively low operating cost. We do have an official quote from the bid process, which is less than $6,500 for an annual cost in the second year through the 10th year for the length of the technology as it survives in the puck. The puck is a battery-operated machinery. After 9 or 10 years, it has to be replaced. But for the length of everything after installation, it could potentially last that long at $6,500 a year or less, depending on the amount of pucks we deploy. It's easily scalable. All you have to do is cut a 12-inch hole in the pavement and drop a puck in, and then make sure that you've got the sort of technology piece that communicates with the puck within a block. And so at the Tucker project, they recommended basically 2 of those sort of, I would think to them like a modem, like a Wi-Fi hub at your house, that sort of communication tool. Sits on a pole, collects all the information. There's not very many of them. It's pretty easy to get in, pretty easy to scale. And really the number one benefit is that it allows for data collection without necessarily having to take any other action, which I think is a viable option for Tucker if we're not looking to go immediately forward. As I've heard people say, hey, maybe we don't have enough data. Are we sure this is really going to solve the problem we want it to solve? With this technology, we could potentially install it and not pass an ordinance right now, and we could take 2 or 3 or 4 months. We could collect the data on what the patterns are and how long people are staying in downtown and understand what the trends actually are. And then we could potentially adjust an ordinance to reflect what we believe needs to happen based on the actual data as it's collected. So those are some of the outlines of the pros and why this is a technology that I think is a good fit for Tucker's use case. One of the other things I'll point out is just that Tucker is a very long main street. So a lot of technologies require like controlled access or limited points of entry. And because we have 5 or 6 different little side roads you can go in and out of, this technology really just tracks the one parking spot. It's not complicated by all of the different access points and that sort of stuff you see in a different sort of parking technology. So it is a capital investment of up to $75,000 in the first year. That is an amount that we have budgeted and available, but that number scales with the number of pucks. So that would be the very, very high end. That number would cover all of the parking spots in the right of way and on city property, including Church Street Green Space and the Tuckertown Green, all of those parking spots. We wouldn't install this on leased property. It would just be on city-owned property. And then the only other con would be that if we have rather short time restrictions, it could be something where if you were to set it to an hour, well, people are going to be violating an hour quite a bit. And then our staff might get 20 or 25 emails a day. And then it becomes something where you really do need a full-time person responding to this. And so in that sort of situation, you'd almost just say, let's go straight to just having a person if you have that short of a time restriction on a parking spot. So those are just some honest assessments of the cons there. We can talk about some of the other technologies. I just want to hit my next slide. We have pros and cons for a number of different technologies here, and we can go through all these, but I really don't want to bog you guys down. I would like to move to questions, and then if you want to ask about a specific other technology, we could do that.
Look at these,
Okay.
just in
Okay.
case somebody asks.
Great. So the in-person enforcement, obviously, you've got someone friendly. They'll be there quickly because they're on site. There's no capital investment. But then you're limited by human presence, human failure. You can't collect data on every vehicle because you don't want someone walking by and taking a picture every time a car enters or leaves. And so it's not really a data collection tool. It's more of just an enforcement tool. There's not really a great data collection structure with having a human there as your in-person enforcement approach. You've got parking phone apps, as I mentioned before, like the pay, park sort of things that sit in front of parking spots. Those can work really well if people really believe that they're going to get towed, if they're really scared of enforcement. But in a place where we would just have time-limited parking and not necessarily paid parking, there's a chance that people may believe that they don't have to scan into a technology. They say, well, I'm not paying anything anyways, so why would I scan it? And we would say, well, we need you to scan into this. And so with a technology like that, it creates an additional administrative barrier where we've got to not only manage whether people stay longer than a certain number of hours, we also have to manage whether people are inputting their information into the system. So it creates an additional fine or fee that we would need to be monitoring. And so it creates a need for us to send people out there ad hoc to enforce that, instead of just sort of a very lean response to when we know something is happening. So it creates a little bit more of a more complicated enforcement scheme. It works and it's a good technology. And if Tucker said we're going to scale into paid parking in 15 years, let's go ahead and get on this wagon and let's use this technology. It could be a great sort of steady stair step in that direction with that type of technology. But frankly, it creates an impetus on the user. When they pull into downtown, they have to do something else other than park their vehicle. And if it doesn't have to be that way, I think it'd be nice if we didn't make people do an extra step of self-reporting when they park in downtown. The other technology next to it is very similar. Instead of having to rely on a phone, though, we could just do kiosks. That's something that's becoming more and more present. You see a lot of that in downtown Atlanta. When you park somewhere, they don't do the scan signs. You just walk over to the kiosk, you put in your vehicle number, and then you print the ticket and you put it on your dashboard. And that's also a valid way for us to track people and keep track of what's going on in there. But again, it's got those same issues of whether or not people self-report, and it makes someone stop between the time when they get out of their vehicle and when they get where they're going. They've got to go spend 4 or 5 minutes with this registration process, which people may not feel like they must do if there's not a cost associated with it. So I want to return back to those public feedback comments that I put on the second slide. And my belief, based on those sort of 3 scenarios, is that a live parking tool like the one that exists on the Parkland Falls app provides information to residents and businesses alike. It's a data collection tool and allows for better information for everybody. I believe that it would be a good investment for the city to look at doing it everywhere in downtown, not just on Main Street, not just in places with time restriction, because then if all the time restricted spots are full, people can still say, oh, well, I know I can go to the Church Street green space. There's 32 spots over there. It's really only an extra 1 block. And that's an ability for people to look at that, because we know, based on the scenario and based on emails I've seen, people will make these 2 and 3 passes where they'll come down Main Street and then they'll take a left or a right and they'll go on Railroad and then they'll go 1 block all the way around. And there's no reason they couldn't pull into a parking spot while they're taking their lap and open the phone and remind themselves which one of these little parking areas has an opening right now. If they're going to take 2 or 3 laps, they can just pull over, check the map, and instead of taking 2 or 3 laps, just go right to somewhere that's open. So that is, I think that would be a good investment for the community, but I understand that obviously it's just a recommendation and there's a lot of options and there's a lot of discussion. And so I'd really like to hear you guys' feedback. What do you think about these technologies? What do you think about that scale of distribution? All of that. I mean, there's a lot of little pieces there. So I really want to stop here, open up discussion, and hear from you guys.
Micah, can I ask you a favor? Because I've heard from some folks there, and I think this is great. There might be other things for us to talk about too, like shorter term solutions and some other things before we could come back to this. But I know you want to talk about 4th Street.
Yeah.
I think there's some folks who want to talk about lighting, like all those different types of things. So let's talk about those little mini steps first and then come back
Great.
to that. Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, well, then we're on to the next. So the next project I wanted to bring to the public, and I know we've discussed it at times with council over the last year or so, is that there are ideas that have been in place for quite some time for the city to sort of reclaim the right-of-way, as we call it. A lot of the historic roads have a very, very wide right-of-way, and then we have relatively small roads. And so what ends up happening is, in the history of historic development, none of these property owners knew or cared that their property line didn't go all the way up to the street. They just built all the way up to the street, and they counted it all as theirs. But frankly, it's simply not true. It is, the property belongs to the city and should be available for public use. And that's something that has been an ongoing discussion for a long time. It was actually captured in one of the very, very early studies. And so I've got action item L4 there. 4th Avenue in Tucker has 100-foot right-of-ways. And that was marked in a study in the downtown Tucker grid plan years ago. So we're not just out here coming up with the random ideas. This is supported in a study. So in many places, reclaiming the right-of-way is cost prohibitive, a lot of times due to topography or underground infrastructure, or even the return on investment. If you've only got 100 feet there and then you've got to have turn radius, it ends up just being, I can only fit 1 parking spot. I'm not going to spend $100,000 to fit 1 parking spot here. So there's not a lot of great choices for this approach, but we are bringing forward one that we do think is ready to go and is a good investment. So this is 4th Street. There are 2 properties there that make up the entire length of 1 block. And as you can see, there's sort of a yellow highlighted area, and then there's sort of that turquoise outline. So the turquoise outline of that property shows where the edge of the property line is, and then the highlighted area shows all of the right-of-way that is between the roadway and the edge of the property line. And so what this project would end up doing is saying, we're going to move the sidewalk all the way up against the property line where the turquoise is, on the exterior of the property line, and then everything that's in highlighted area there becomes roadside parking. I believe Mr. Hildebrand said that would be 17 parking spots, maybe 18 after final design. We're going to be making the parking spots a little bit wider than what's in the screenshot there, and then we're going to be adding, some little islands following our own ordinances about that sort of thing. So we're going to be looking at 70 to 18 new parking spots that are pull-in parking spots from the roadway. So this is something that's under design. We've got engineers it is underway. We are understanding what's possible, making sure there's no, deal breakers in the engineering of the process. And so this is something that we would be requesting funds for construction in the next fiscal year. So it could be early in the fiscal year, it could be late summer or early fall, that we would be ready to try to fit construction in. I'll let the construction people decide what's realistic, but that seems like it could be a timeline that would work for us. Couple other things, just a reminder, these are things that I brought up in the November presentation. Obviously, we're always looking for ongoing low capital opportunities with the Browning Village. As I said before, they've offered to go ahead and put 2 spots in the right-of-way right by the entrance of the development over there. So that will be beneficial to guests when they go to those residences if the road is full and if the driveways are full. It could also be of benefit to the city during large events. It could be beneficial to people who live and work down there. So it's just 2 more parking spots, and we're always looking for opportunities to partner with developers and partner with the people who are working in downtown and making improvements to their property to see if there's a way that there can be mutual benefit. We're always evaluating other right-of-way opportunities and also looking at properties nearby if it's appropriate. And in this case, you'll hear from John about surplus properties that DeKalb County owns afterwards. And that could always, potentially open a small window for us. I wanted to refresh you guys on the time-limited parking ordinance that I brought to you in November. What we were discussing at the time was restricting the amount of time someone could be only on Main Street, restricting that to a 4-hour time period, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, every spot adjacent to Main Street between La Vista and Lawrenceville Highway. The one thing that came out of the meeting that was very clear is that we would not be doing the fine that was in the original draft of that ordinance. So we'd certainly look to bring that down based on your feedback. But didn't get a clear sense that we were ready to pick a time length or for staff to bring back an ordinance to you at any certain point for consideration or for approval. And then the last thing I just want to remind you guys again of is the ideas that we had for sort of reclaiming the right-of-way again in a visual sense for these parking spots and for the signage needed for time-limited enforcement. So obviously we would want the parking spots to be marked. We need it to be clear to people when they come into downtown what is public parking and what's not, what kind of signs, that say you can only be here for X amount of time. So we would need all of that to be done. And so as part of that, we'd like to roll out a new coat of white stripes on all the public parking spots. We would not do green in the right-of-way. We'd keep the green on the private property. And then, at every parking island, we put up a sign. There's lots of little improvements to be made. Labeling on the pavement is really what we'd like to do. So if you pull into a parking spot, it will say time limited on the ground when you drive over it. Very clear communication with the public. And that way we've sort of got passive, ongoing communication that doesn't require really any upkeep of that. So that's a big investment that would really only make sense to move forward with an ordinance. It doesn't provide necessarily it doesn't make sense in the context without moving forward with an ordinance. And that is the 5th item. So I'm just going to do a final recap of sort of what we are proposing what I'm proposing as a good direction, as a good option. There are many options, but I think it would be great if we would move forward with the magnetic puck technology. We'd bring back a contract to you all at the next meeting if you're in support of it. It would not be $75,000. That was a quote for a number of pucks. That's more than the parking spaces we have in downtown Tucker. So it will come in under that amount. That's just the high end. And it would provide a public-facing parking app that would say, City of Tucker downtown parking. People could download on their phones. We would look to collect data as soon as possible and into the summertime and hopefully get a good month or two of in-school data and then a month of out-of-school data just to understand what those trends look like before we would try to bring an ordinance back maybe in July or August for your consideration. And through that time, we would try to perform data analysis and report to you all, what are we seeing? What's the longest amount of time people are staying? What's the turnover like? What's the number of vehicles that enter these parking spots in a day? All that kind of information. And we would try to create a data-backed time-limited parking ordinance. And the one thing we would want to hear is, clear targets for what that really needs to look like. If we have a bunch of people parking for 3 hours and 45 minutes, do you want staff to recommend a 4-hour limit, or do you want staff to recommend a 3-hour limit? Because we're trying to get people to move through a little bit more quickly because we want to turn over the parking spots and support the businesses. Those are policy decisions. While we can present good data, we still need a policy decision about the level of data that we're able to provide to you. And then we could discuss whether time-limited parking is an appropriate tool. If we look at the data and 95% of the parking spots turn over in 90 minutes, well, then we might look at that and say, okay, well, 90 minutes is a reasonable lunchtime, and most of the spots are turning over in that length of time. And it turns out that we have the data to be able to say accurately that most of the time parking spots are turning over in a reasonable amount of time, and time-limited parking is not the right tool in this situation. So that could always be an outcome of 3 months of data collection. And then if a time-limited parking ordinance were in place, I just want to reiterate that this tool works without an ordinance by collecting data, but it also works with an ordinance by allowing for lien enforcement through staff. And potentially, if we want to improve communication and we want to do a launch, we want to put someone on the street for 2 weeks who walks up and down and passes out flyers. There's lots of things that we could do to improve communication, but this is just focused on sort of the sustainable long-term program. I touched a lot. Questions,
So
comments to each other?
I'm going to start this time because I've been quiet. We own space in the annex. I know I can park there. Many of you park there. I would encourage all city staff when you go downtown to frequent a restaurant to park there and leave other spaces open as well. But we're also a public entity that owns those spaces. And so what can we do in that parking lot to, I don't know if it's paint those spaces green or whatever, to say, I don't know if we have an agreement in our contract, you're given so many parking spaces in the annex parking lot. Do you see what I'm saying, John? We own space in that building. We know that when it's used for parks or other events that we put on there, people park in there. That parking lot is never full. We all know we can park there, but other people don't. So is there something that we can do in that parking lot to show to folks that they can park there?
Yep, that's a great question. And Micah, you've been working with the board at the Tucker Professional Building, so you can follow. I know that the organization does, which we are a part of because we own 3 spaces at the annex at Tucker Professional Building. But can you find out about
Yeah.
that?
You mean 3 office spaces?
3 office
Yeah.
spaces,
Yeah.
yes, in that office condo.
I didn't want people to think we just own 3 parking spaces. Sorry. It's getting late.
Yeah.
Okay, so that might be something for us to look at. And I just also wanted to put on your radar, I've been playing phone tag with some of them. Emory University or Emory Healthcare closed their clinic right there
Yeah.
because they moved it to North Lake. And so there are spaces there. There's signs that say you can't park here unless you're medical staff. But I just wonder if there's a conversation in a short term to be had with them, until we know what they want to do, with that building. So that could be something. I hate putting more of this on your plate, but it's just, and I have relationships with their real estate folks, so I can ask
Great.
that question because we've got a call this week. And then it goes back to what you were saying. We talk about gathering data. If you go downtown on weekends and there's not a big event, that church parking lot is empty. And so that's telling me that business owners are not encouraging their employees to park there, like we encourage them to do so. And there are some business owners who have emailed us before that have said it's still definitely employees are a problem. High school students, a little bit, maybe not as much now. There are there's a business on Main Street that puts out their own, here's how you park to come see us, right? So that tells us we need to do a better job of that if they're doing it, right? And so, those types of things, I think we are still in a space where we have not done the education or offered the tool, like you're saying, for people to understand, yes, you can park here, right? They don't, stuff's on the doorway after I get to the restaurant, or the information somewhere else after I get to where I need to be. So, and I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that we need to do a better job of sharing that, or the signage. And I know I've noticed some newer signs out too, but those types of things. And then I don't know if it's worth another conversation with employers there or the business owners to really talk about that enforcement of get your employees out of the spaces. Like, I'll just say I know one because their car is marked for that business and they're constantly in front. I mean, there's no way around it. Their car is marked for what they do, and it's right there. And it's really not a business friendly for Main Street. And then some of these business owners that emailed said, less than 4 hours if it's something that we think that we need to do the enforcement. And they also talked about signage and wayfinding. It needs to be significantly better, and having some kind of option like you discussed. So, yeah. We got all of that.
I've got it on video.
I'm teasing him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think what a lot of what the mayor shared goes to your slide 13 about the passive communication overhaul. And I would make the argument, and I think probably several of us would, that it does make sense regardless of if we do time limited parking or not. So like having all of the public parking in lots, in right of way, painted, which I know we've discussed several different times over the past year, as a first step to just let people know. I think even signage that, if you're concerned about costs, if we did an ordinance eventually that has enough of a space where we can add something to it if we needed, but would still highlight that. What I don't know if you were talking about me about the lighting. We have a lot of these presentations focused solely on lunchtime during the week. There are a lot of opportunities for the evening, and to think about this as an economic development tool that drives people to downtown. We do not have lighting in Railroad Avenue parking lot. It is a excellent parking lot. We have resurfaced it. It has painted well. It is not lit, and it is very dark. And then there is not a crosswalk that is painted from that parking lot to the other, either direction. Obviously the railroad's one direction. So I think that like a comprehensive approach to, again, the greater downtown, not just Main Street, making everything visible. And we think about it as placemaking, and we think about it as, so that includes, yes, where can you park, but it also includes where can you walk? How easy is it to get from wherever you're parking to wherever you're going on foot? How can we eventually think about, utilizing the few ADA spaces we have more effectively? Because I do think some of the folks that have raised concerns, they want to be able to park right in front of a business. And so I think just immediate first steps, like getting a can of paint. I know it's not that easy, but it's kind of that easy. Getting a can of paint and
Do not be Kramer at Seinfeld and get out there and paint lines on the road.
I'm not going to do it, but when Ishri's ready to do it, I mean, I'll go out in a jumpsuit and help. But I think really thinking about it comprehensively and not just the right of way, right? But those lots, which kind of goes to my question about the pucks, which I think is a really exciting idea. I think you and I talked about this before, but you go to certain parking decks, even ones that are free. And yeah, it's at the airport, it's at CHOA. I unfortunately know that too well. But you know, it has the lights that are green or red. And so you can see very clearly and easily where you can go park. I would be interested in at least looking at what it would look like in some of those lots as, again, like a broader mechanism to inform people about what's available. I know there was a bank, I'm not going to say which one because I don't know if we're allowed to, who had said that their lot would be available after hours. So being able, even with the pucks, to be able to even turn those on at 5 p.m. So like it looks red during the day, but then it's green or whatever, you know, like open, turns on at a certain time in key places. I mean, that could be at the annex, it could be at other places too. I think really being able to put that in front of people where we have the app live on the website, we have it, you know, where people can do it on their phones, but I think it gets to that communication. And I just, before we get into any decision about adding in time limits, I think like we do need to do a really comprehensive like education, communication, and really making it feel like we are invested in our downtown again as a place, and not just as a like for people to drive in and out. And then the final piece is if we do end up doing something like the pucks, and the data collection that you talked about, I know we've gotten some great feedback even tonight, but also from the CID, and I know we have it as well from the Placer AI data, but I do think that that would be an interesting approach, is to do a sort of planned study using Placer AI around parking to be able to kind of add in addition to whatever these like the pucks might be.
You had your hand up.
Yeah, that's out of confusion. I was like, don't call on me. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of different options here. There's a lot of different timelines here, which I find a bit, not you, but I find it a bit troubling. And overall, with the amount of parking spaces and what we are attempting to do, educate the public, I agree with that. And number two, make more businesses more accessible to more clientele or patrons. I thought I understood this until I listened to it. You didn't confuse me. Maybe you illuminated me, but do I understand these magnetic pucks are not an enforcement vehicle?
Right, so they don't automatically enforce. They just collect the information that someone's present,
Yeah.
and then they've got like a central hub, and then that will basically just send an email to a staff member that would say, we need someone to go enforce this.
Okay, but if like I'm in favor of, if the parking were 2 hours, there would be a lot of emails potentially coming here.
Yeah.
And back in November, I thought, you know, I wasn't bothered too much by the fine, but a fine should be about $35. So it's not punitive in nature, but also part educational. I think if someone got a $75 ticket, they say, I'm never coming back here again, potentially. And I think 35 is more palatable, or 30, whatever it might be. I am hesitant to think of investing, and I know you said it's not a full $75,000, but investing in this puck technology, if it's merely to teach us trends and timing and parking, it's sounds like it's too much trouble, probably too much expense for something that's not brain surgery. I know red means stop. I know yellow means yield, and I don't know what Gen Z or AA or whatever's up to bat now knows, but blue to me means parking spots, or hospital, one or the other. We don't have a hospital yet. So I think certain blue parking signs might be the less stringent way to identify the other parking lots. We had talked at one point about signs with code you can just scan and it shows you where the parking is. Having someone pull over to find green parking spots may be a bit difficult or hazardous. And it sounds like almost too much effort. And I think unless Gen Z is not visual and can't just see what they're doing in parking, I got problems with that. So my thought process is that we don't wait too long or to put enforcement in place by whatever means that might be. And that it goes through an educational period. We're not using it to raise capital for the city coffers or anything like that. We're trying to teach learned behavior. And then we educate the public of when it actually goes into effect, whether that's 4 months, 6 months, whatever it might be, and then they face fines. I think the 2-hour limit educates those certain businesses where cars park. And to the extent the employees I can't see going out and moving 2 hours, they're going to go to that church parking lot, I would think. And back in November, if I recall, I also thought there should be a conversation between the city and Tucker High School, because I thought they were charging their students for parking, and that was forcing the students to go and park on Main Street during the day. So that may still be a little quid pro quo that we could go after. And I say everything I just said, as confused as my brain is now, and without yet thinking about adding in what our valuable legal counsel has said about ticketing cars and what that could or could not mean.
What did our legal counsel say about ticketing or not ticketing cars? Oh, sorry. He said they're eating candy.
I think I said, and I hope I said, you can do it. You can put a ticket on the car, paper ticket, but there's no failure to appear notice. Benchmark, you're ever going to send anybody with a parking ticket, they do blow off. They can make a mess. It's not personal service. It kind of relies on the honesty of the person who gets the parking ticket.
Well, don't say that to everybody.
That's
We don't
why I
want that.
didn't say it.
We don't want to.
That is exactly why I didn't say it out loud, but
It's 9:30.
you're
No one's
new
listening.
here.
No, it's 9:30. No one's listening. All right. Kara, did you have anything on this side? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much. This was a really comprehensive and just well laid out with everything for us to consider. For example, I think the thing that impressed me the most was because this is our objective is to look at the problem and listen to the feedback of the community and find viable solutions. And so in your slides, you kind of lay that out. Like, here's some of the things that we're hearing. Here's our challenge. Here are here's some solutions. Here's my recommendation. So I really appreciate that. Also, I just want to say that I appreciate Councilmember Weaver and Orlando's comments because I agreed with a lot of what they had to say. I'm going to try not to, regurgitate what they're saying or whatever, but repeat what they're saying. But so I do really like the parking opportunities on 4th Street a lot. And we had talked about this a little bit, that there are opportunities in our public right-of-ways in the downtown area. I like this as a first opportunity. One of the reasons why I really like this idea is because of the economic development training that we did in downtown Duluth. And I've seen other cities doing this, but this is where it clicked for me because we're having to do the same things that a lot of other cities have had to do. We've got to retrofit parking into an already built out, downtown area. And I went down, so I did this economic development training, and then I went back with my family on a Saturday night a few weeks later, and I found parking so easily. And one of the reasons why I felt like it was a case is because the parking was not centralized. Now, they do have a parking deck and all, but I was able to park right where I wanted to go because the parking was decentralized all around the downtown area. I look at opportunities like the 4th Street parking as an opportunity to disseminate traffic. Everything is not pushed to downtown. I feel like it also opens up and like kind of in favor of what Councilmember Orlando was saying about maybe taking that Main Street down to 2 hours, which I wasn't necessarily a fan of that before. But if we are providing options for folks to park just a little bit further away and say, walk from the backside up to Village Burger or whatever, we're taking that centralized heat on the downtown area and giving people options. So they should be able to, find other parking if they want to come downtown and park for 3 hours. We now have, and as you put in your slide so well, we have done work over the last year or so, right? We now have the spots along the downtown park. We have found all these other places. So we are opening up those options slowly. And I just really like the strategy of taking these opportunities in the public right of ways and chipping away at it. I also kind of see it as an economic development sort of thing too. There's a little bit of beautification opportunity on there, make it a little more welcoming, more lighting, all these other things that, I just feel like would trigger ideas from developers, other opportunities to spread just, around the larger downtown area. I did talk about the 2 hours. I like the idea of lower. I agree 100% with Councilmember Orlando. We're here to change patterns. We're not here to be punitive. We've heard from the community, this is one of the top concerns from the community. They want to have parking. It's been a long conversation. So how do we do that? I think communication is certainly important, but I think part of it is just kind of retraining people with a soft fine, with the signage, those kinds of things that just starts to toggle people like, hey, we're listening to you, we're changing things, but it doesn't feel punitive. I mean, the ultimate goal is to have our downtown businesses all be very viable and successful. And we want those on Main Street in particular who are, feeling the heat of trying to get that parking, trying to get turnover so they can fill the tables, have visitors and stuff like that. We want to accomplish that, and we can still do that without it being, really harsh on our community. Is there any other guidance that you were asking for? Because it was a lot.
Yeah, I've
but-
got some questions on the next slide, but this is still just open discussion. We haven't even gotten to questions yet. So
Oh,
because
Okay.
the questions are pointed, they're narrow. They were not like open-ended discussion questions. The discussion is great.
yeah. And well, I'll just say really quickly the one thing I will say is as we're having funding conversations and we're starting to enter our budget season, and I'm feeling very, just concerned, about our, like the funding conversations we've had and all that. I was a little bit concerned about the uptick of 75,000. So I was kind of relieved to hear that it would be maybe a little bit less than that. And then my last little comment question was the 60,000 for all of the signage and everything like that is like a whole, like that's not budgeted, right? That would have to be budgeted this next cycle, but this is budgeted, correct?
It depends on how quickly. I mean, we've got a couple of different projects that could all come out of, we have like a parking line item. So it depends on how quickly each different thing were to come out. So that it could work this year. It could be something that would have to happen after the next fiscal year. It depends on which thing we get done just in the next
Yeah.
couple of months.
Understood. Okay. That's all I have then. Thank you.
Councilman Orlando wanted to comment on something that you.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with Councilmember Reese, but I did make a note about the 4th Street reclamation. And for the addition of 17 or 18 spaces, I would be hesitant to do that up front, and that would be once the city of Tucker has 100,000 cars coming in, parking all the time, maybe then, because number one, you probably are going to upset some business owners. And number two, other than 4th Street, there are some other well-known anchor businesses that the same reclamation could apply to, and I wouldn't want selective reclamation and enforcement. That's all.
come down here in a minute.
In terms of because the capital work, Ken is still here, but they're coming from different, or Eric, different pots, as I understand.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the budget number. I believe we had, I really have to go look and I don't want to get it wrong, but it was between either 200 or 250,000 in the line item for the year to address just parking. Got a couple different things that we're talking about in this, and then the engineering for the 4th Street project is already coming out of there. And so there's, we're using it to draw down on a lot of different things at the same time, as we've been talking about, which is they're all smaller bites. And so, and for construction, like if we were to construct the 4th Street, that would be out of a line item next year for parking that we'd bring to you all. And so that would be a budget request that would come back to you.
And where I'm going with this is that it's an opportunity, as we're very close to rolling into the budget. So just be thinking about how you want to allocate that.
Okay. Thank you. Jochi.
Okay, good thing about going to my last is that a lot of it's been covered. I thank you. This is fantastic. First thing on 4th Street, I think it's a great idea. Of course, I'm super interested in the cost, but I don't want to lose the idea that that would open up like another gateway to downtown. Right now, it's just, an alley where you're afraid you might get run over. I think if we do the parking and then maybe talk about making that more of a walkable alley, artwork, lights, that kind of thing, I think that would be a very good option. I think people are going to flock to certain areas, and if we open up another completely new area, I think that could also be like almost like an economic driver. Like people need to be aware of parts of downtown that aren't just Main Street. So I think that's good. I think the second thing, because I looked at your questions coming up,
Right.
I don't necessarily want an ordinance yet without data, but I do probably think there's a more cost-effective way for us to evaluate Main Street parking without doing the pucks. I'll say more on the pucks in just a second, but I think the data we would be gathering primarily is Main Street. We wouldn't have to gather data on every single right-of-way parking spot. So I think there's probably a more cost-effective way to gather the data that we would need to talk about the ordinance, other than installing actual physical stuff. But with that said, I think the puck system sounds great for an eventual enforcement situation if we needed it. And it also sounds great for data if we get to the point that we need it. Because I do think we're going to see kind of an explosion downtown, but I think it would be suitable for after an ordinance or after we gather that data. Because what I love that it's low effort on the drivers and it's low risk data. Because whenever you say data, people freak out a little bit. So it's not gathering a license plate or anything that could be tracked to an actual person. It's very low risk data, and I like that. And I had thought, like Councilwoman Weaver, about Placer AI as helping us get data, but I think I remember Matthew saying that's largely foot traffic. So for this, I think maybe if you could go back to those companies and maybe ask them about some data gathering suggestions that they have that could help us as a precursor to the technology that they're suggesting, I think that would be great. Thank you.
All right.
I'm all for the 4th Street reclamation. I think we should build parking now before we need it. It attracts more businesses towards that area and more people. I remember there was brief discussions of 2nd Street. Also, I think we should also revisit that, turning it one way and adding parking spots there. Again, really activating more outside of Main Street. I want to support everyone else in the 2-hour time limit. I talked to our CID and all of our restaurants and businesses downtown. They're all for 2 hours. Our CID has already used Placer AI data and mentioned that the longest stay that they have is about 90 minutes. So I think with our problem statement, we already know, right? The problem is employees and sometimes some students. I think if we gather data, all it's going to tell us is there's a bunch of students, there's a bunch of employees that are parking there. I think, while it's nice to gather data, sometimes data sets get skewed because of what is going on in real life. If we wanted to test out like a way to do 2-hour enforcement, could we do like a soft enforcement where, we just put up a sign, doesn't have to be like permanent, and say that this is for 2 hours?
Without an ordinance, I'm not sure, but I know I've talked with the city attorney about this quite a bit. And in terms of strict enforcement, I think the number one thing is that you can't be prejudiced in any way about who and where and when you do it. So you could not enforce for 26 days, and then you have to enforce every spot on the 27th day. It's got to be even-handed. But it would be possible to pass an ordinance and then say, okay, we're going to have a person go pass out flyers for the next month, but we are not going to write a ticket at all for the next month. And it would be sort of an internal policy, probably best held close to the vest, but certainly an approach that we could do.
Well, thank you for that. I really want to support the magnetic pucks. I think that's a really smart strategy. I don't think the public-facing parking app will work the way that we want and intended. I think, Councilmember Orlando hit it on the head, right? No one's going to drive and then they can't find a parking spot, and then they have to find somewhere to park, to scan the QR code, to download an app, to look for a parking spot. So I think while it's nice to have that, if they're charging us for it and we can get a discount, let's just kind of omit that. I was just in Gilbert, and when you guys mentioned the red light, green light, I saw Courtney's eyes like really bulge out of her head. So I don't think she's like for that. But what they did in Gilbert is they used the exact same technology, and instead of hundreds of lights on parking lots, they had signs that said, in this area there's 15 parking spots available. I think that's something that's easy to see, something that you can just drive by and quickly like turn in because there's available parking.
Yeah, that could be. I can look at whether or not that technology translates into that and see if it's possible at least. In terms of the application part of it, we don't have to have a public-facing app. There's the way they presented it in the bid was that the staff-facing app has a lot more capabilities because we would need to be able to get into the data and understand it. The public-facing app is actually just a stripped-down version of the staff app. It requires no extra development work on their end, so we could turn it on and turn it off either way. It's
Okay.
not an extra cost.
Lastly, I just want to kind of say to my fellow council members, I think that we should move fast on this, as fast as possible. This has been a 3-4 year journey. And while, every month to a business owner is, whether their lights stay on or off, this is their livelihood, and, our indecision is a decision, right? So that's costing people valuable funds that they could allocate, to the city, their employees.
Mayor,
Woman Schroeder.
Just real quick, I agree we need to move fast on this. I think that you've brought us some really great opportunities and suggestions, and I appreciate that. I know that parking downtown is a big deal and we continue to hear about it. And so I'm hoping we can continue to figure it out and continue to work on it, because I don't think it's going to be solved just with 17 more parking spots here or 20 more there. And we're going to have to continue to communicate about it and the options in it. My big question, or my big moment after listening to everybody, is we're talking about parking. We're talking about communicating opportunities around Main Street for options. We also talked about a little bit about budget and then lighting. And I feel like lighting, especially in some places, if we could fix the lighting, especially in the evening hours, we might have more options that people will say, oh, I didn't see it. I'm not comfortable parking there. So I feel like with the budget that we just heard, we may have some options that we should also look into that as well. So, sorry.
All right. Do you think you have enough like we've answered your questions without answering your questions directly.
Would you mind if I put them up on the screen real quickly? So, the first was, should staff bring a contract back to you for magnetic pucks and at that scale? So just to comment on the cost of it, the cost that we were quoted on was included all of the private parking lots. So it was for like 320 parking spaces. And, we wouldn't recommend putting pucks on a private parking lot for a lease that's going to dry up in a couple of years. So the cost should go down by about 30% optimistically. We'd have to get a new quote to know for sure, but that's where that would sit. If it was about 200, if it was down to 70, that number gets closer to 23,000. And then obviously not at all is an option. So that I did feel like I heard conflicting opinions
Go get a
about,
quote for just Main Street.
yes.
If that's where we're gonna enforce 2-hour parking, then just get a quote for Main Street for right now.
I have that.
Because
quote.
I'm not sure everybody's convinced.
Yep.
And I understand, I think it's good because it's data. And it could be awareness. It could just be an option for folks. If you're somebody who wants to look at it before you head down to Main Street, I think it's still fine to share that with the public, right? And then enforcement, because we're gonna have to, just throw that out there.
I have
Okay.
that number and I'll float it to you guys.
All right.
Let you see it. Questions about 4th Street. I think I heard pretty resounding support, so we would include that as a budget line item to bring to you all in the budget for next fiscal year. Specific details on time limited parking. I think I heard pretty good, clear direction on what they would be.
What?
I clearly am in the minority, but I'm still against us moving forward with an ordinance until we do a number of other things. And when I say we should move forward, I think it's the communication, because I still don't believe that people know about the 300 something spots you just named. And so before we start talking any enforcement, I still believe there's a lot of people who aren't actually trying to come downtown to make those decisions. So I don't know. So I'm just saying, I'm right now, I'm not.
Well, and we've not said go do an ordinance.
Yep.
I'm all for getting this other stuff done as well. Some of it might take a little longer, but we can come back for
Yep.
that discussion. But I think if we were to do one, I think everybody was like, yeah, 2 hours is good. Business owners have said it. So if there was one,
Yeah,
2 hours.
I did not hear a resounding yes to bring it back. I did hear a yes on 2 hours, on a lower fine, and on Main Street only. And those were some of the key parts of the ordinance. That's skipping number 4, and the bottom one. When would you like to have the ordinance return afterwards? So just to recap, I think what I did hear though is that you guys would like to move forward with us doing striping and improved signage and wayfinding. That number that I put up on that other slide for $60,000, that is a number that is an estimate of the built environment, everything Tucker can do to impact the built environment, and we can look at how much it would cost to work with Georgia Power to add a couple of light poles or add lights to poles that are already there for leaner options and that sort of thing. So we can take a whole look at that and look at what it would take to, I guess, sort of re-message downtown and
And the crosswalk.
And the
we got
crosswalk.
Crosswalks, that was mentioned as well. And then also, let's look at Annex, right? What's owed to us there? And we can work options with other folks who don't really have a lot of visitors at their space either, perhaps. And then Emory University, just to see what's going to happen with those spaces too. And I think people will learn and start parking there anyway. And then I know that there is the bank that talked about after hours, and it could even be daytime hours because they don't have a lot. They could buy spaces back or lease spaces back. So let's look at those options too.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you, Micah. All right, what's next? Transfer of DeKalb County surplus property to the city of Tucker. Mr. McHenry.
Yes. We soon on the screen for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, so there were a number of properties that we had not transferred over. as a new city. And we've been working closely, great relationship that we have with DeKalb County and their folks. And these are all not properties, obviously they're police, watershed, fire, buildings with properties that have facilities on them. That's not what we're talking about here. I know that this is a very difficult map to see here, but the point is not to go in and identify the properties per se, but just to show that they are fairly spread out across our 20 square miles of the city. So we worked with our Public Works and our city attorney to identify which parcels would be appropriate for the city to take on from a risk management standpoint. And we actually, it's moved very quickly on some of these. And when the Board of Commissioners actually approved the release of 12 of those properties, and we still have 16 under review. So though here again, difficult to see some of these properties, but if you can, again, spread out across the city, and I'm going to highlight here where we have, actually, I'm going to cruise ahead to this, where you can see a lot of these properties are the old trolley lines along East Ponce, and this is along where the Stone Mountain Trail that we were discussing earlier this evening is. So the total 12 parcels that we already have received, that's virtually 10 acres, and we're working to finalize that. And
Go back to those
Sure.
addresses.
this one,
So
Mayor?
no, the addresses.
Oh, yeah. Next over, yep.
There you go. So
Yep.
these are the ones that transferred to us.
Yes.
Okay, let's sit there for a minute. Okay.
Yeah, talked about that. This is good in terms of allowing us to have that full maintenance. That's a very important part of our overall trail network that's already in the city. And as we build out our trails and continue with the South Fork Peachtree Creek Greenway Trail and the Greenway Connector that connects to it and so forth, this will be an important part of that overall network. Next steps as we continue, we're working to get full documentation. We do have documentation that this went to the Board of Commissioners, but we're still waiting on these other for the full disbursement of those 12. And then we have 16 of the 28 going through additional steps of analysis, some of which include some of the park deeds that didn't come to us in the beginning, which is in our IGA, and our city attorney could speak more eloquently about where we stand with that. But this is something where we're speaks to our great relationship with DeKalb County as we clean up these properties, and allows for easier maintenance of these properties. We've looked at it from a risk management. We're not taking on any additional risk. And then in some cases, we'll further our redevelopment goals.
Mr. Baggett, did you want to speak to that?
I'll just speak briefly to the legal process. So there, with respect to the park properties, there is an IGA that dates to 2018 that has a lengthy list as an attachment of park properties that were to be transferred under that agreement to the city of Tucker by DeKalb County. And there's a statute that has been on the books since new cities began to be created in DeKalb that predates Tucker, that defines that the cost of those park properties when a new city incorporates is $100 per acre. That's all memorialized in that agreement. For reasons I don't fully have the backstory to, before I became city attorney, only some of those properties were ever deeded to the city. And of course, to legally convey and record, you have to legally convey and record an interest on the Superior Court deed records in order to be able to prove ownership. And so for some of the park properties, there are deeds that have been executed by the then CEO that have been recorded. For some, there are not. I don't understand. I don't know the backstory as to why that is, but I mean, the agreement is clear. The listed properties are clear. statute was in force and effect, the IGA was signed by both city officials and the county officials. So the park properties, by virtue of that intergovernmental agreement, are the property, legally the property and the ownership of the city. But that final step should be done in order to clarify that. But that's not something the city can do unilaterally. Someone at DeKalb County with the authority to bind the county must sign a deed that is then recorded. And so I think the city just has to work with the DeKalb County officials to get at why that hasn't been done and to try to make that happen.
Okay. Thank you. We'll continue to do that. Do we know the remaining 16, why they're remaining?
Honestly, do not know specifically. I do know that there is one of the parcels, an undeveloped parcel in the downtown that they have done, we have done an appraisal on. And I believe they being DeKalb County wants to do an appraisal on because they do want a monetary reimbursement for that specific parcel. But regarding the other ones, I don't know, but we will look to find that out.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Questions? Anybody? Questions? No questions. All right. Next steps.
Next steps is we continue to work with DeKalb County and move this forward and move this cleanup in regards to the parks properties and these other properties and ideally come to some conclusion about this one specific property in the downtown.
Have we broached a deadline with them to get these 12?
We
through the
have
legal
monthly calls with them. We understand it's in their under legal review is what we are told.
But you know what that means? Sometimes things go there to die. Sorry, Ted. It's true. I know, I'm teasing you. But let's.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just really quickly also because it may or may not pertain to me, but a few of these, like over by Henderson Park, but residential properties and have for a long time, and there may be confusion as to who is responsible for those. And so as we're taking over some where we may be paying more attention to them than DeKalb County has necessarily paid to them over time, like they maybe have gotten overgrown or a tree has fallen on them and remained there for 2+ years or other things. Anyway, as we start to take these properties on and start to pay more attention and look at cleaning them up and looking at maintaining them with our own standards, do we have any idea or thoughts about how to communicate with the neighboring residences? Again, some of them are commercial, but some of them are residential. So so I guess I should say just across the board, communicating with property owners about the fact that we are taking these over and like how we're going to approach that side of it once we get through legal review.
That's a great question. We certainly would want to reach out to the neighboring community and let them know the neighboring parcel owners. I think it just speaks overall to our focus on maintenance moving forward for, lots that we may own that we want to upkeep that weren't being upkept in the past, and then all the public facilities that we're building.
Well, and I think the other part is that some people may not know that they were owned by the county and they may have thought that it was their property, like especially if they've lived in a place for a very long time and they haven't gone back and looked at their deed or something like that. And so if you're looking at some of the ones by Henderson Park, those back up to people's backyards, right? That very well they could have been using as their backyard. And so I just how we think about how we talk with the neighboring folks.
Yeah, that's a
true.
great point. We will definitely follow up on that.
Yes.
I mean, what's the so there's all these properties. Do they all have different situations? Like some of them are just going to be a paperwork thing, and this one might be a financial thing, and then some others might be we've been acting like it's our own, and so really there's going to be no change. Is it a variety of things?
I would say that is accurate. I would
Okay.
say some of them are to the earlier point, folks wouldn't know where their property begins and ends and where this is. I mean, the ones on East Ponce I think would fall under that. There are other ones that are fairly specific, the ones I'm thinking of downtown. And then, they're the ones we've discussed it about that are actually park properties that we are currently invested on. So it really depends.
Okay. Like, I'd be interested at some point to see a list of that and to understand whether we've been already treating it like ours and I'd kind of like to know a little more about each one and what the impact is.
Yep. We can certainly get that. I would immediately delegate that to Micah, who's actually done all the legwork on this, but we can get that list to you and we can give you a little one sentence description of what it is too.
All right. H5. John, that's you.
Oh, yes. Yes, we have upcoming agenda items. Put that up on the screen. So what's coming down the pike? We talked about, we know we've got the loitering because we only do voting items at the first meeting of the month. And we've got upcoming special land use permit. We won't probably be pushing the approval of the Transportation Trail Master Plan out as we continue to refine that. And then we've been on our special compaction district. This is a little bit complex in terms of the levels of mechanics that we need to do, but it is needed and as part of our overall redevelopment plan. I'm not going to read through all the contracts. We've got a bunch coming at you and we're very excited about the Henderson Park Master Plan. I'm not sure if that's completely finalized at this point, but we had 23, right? Which I think really speaks to the fact that folks want to work with the city of Tucker and a lot of really, creative ideas in terms of what they want to look at doing in the park, in terms of what kind of public outreach they were looking to do. So very excited about that program. And then we are going to keep moving forward with Rosenfeld Park and we'll see that moving forward. And then the Mountain Industrial Hugh Howell project, construction administration with the design engineer, and it's Government Finance Professionals Week coming up. Yeah, we're looking at you, Eric Kahn. And then
Our budget.
we'll have a presentation on the student assignment project with DeKalb County. They come here and speak to us, and then more financial. So lots coming down the pike.
All right. Questions to John? I have one quick question. Probably should have asked this previously. We have something for design and engineering services for the Yellow Trail at Henderson Park, and we also have the Henderson Park Master Plan. Nothing would change on the Yellow Trail, I'm going to assume, out of the master plan?
Right. I think that has already been programmed, and it also is a Land Water Conservation Fund DNR grant,
Okay.
which has a timeline to it, so it needs to be moving forward.
Just a quick question. Shoot me daggers. I'm just asking. All right. Very good. All right. Mayor and council comments. Councilwoman Troche, I'm going to start here. Anybody? All right.
Okay, so I'm gonna name it even though it got rescheduled, but Networks is cooperative ministry. Every year I've learned brings in the Atlanta Community Food Bank to do their community food experience, which is a really great way to not just learn about food insecurity, but also the struggles that people face. I'm really proud. So I used to work at the Atlanta Community Food Bank, and I really helped the first one come to Tucker a couple of times. It's a really great learning experience. And so while it has been rescheduled, I anticipate that it will still happen in the next few weeks. And so I do want to flag for anybody listening, but hopefully we will have an opportunity to coordinate with them on picking the rescheduled date. And so it's really meant for people that maybe don't get to experience all of these things or work with people who are experiencing them in their day-to-day life. And really, I think can influence policy decisions, but also just community care and, Networks has this focus on loving your neighbor as yourself, and that's a personal philosophy of mine. It's not a hard one, but it is a hard one apparently for some people. So I think it's a really great opportunity. So I just wanted to flag that it's going to be rescheduled. It's not tomorrow after all, but it is coming up. And then I just wanted to flag, I'm excited again, since we're at the end, just to talk about Restaurant Week. So just to bookend it, that also as people are out and about, all of us will be out at various places all week. And so please just stop us and say hi and, maybe have a snack with us or feel free to talk to us while we're out there.
Good point. I know everybody's going to be out and about. I know District 2 is super organized with theirs. So thank you. We'll be joining you guys. And yeah, excellent, excellent, excellent. Great job, everybody tonight. Great presentations, excellent questions for everybody. We got through a lot. I know it's late, but we got through a lot. And I think it was a great meeting. So if I can get a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All right, no discussion. All those in favor, hands are already up. All those in favor?